12th, 2021 to order. I'd like to recognize Pastor Sharon Covington Edwards from New Life Community Temple of Faith to provide our invocation.
Good evening, Council, and thank you for this opportunity. Let us pray. Heavenly Father, we tell you thank you for another beautiful day that you have allowed us to see. We thank you, Father, for this opportunity to come together once again to make decisions for our beautiful city of Monroe. I'm asking you, Heavenly Father, to remember our mayor and all of those that sit in seats of authority, and I ask that you would bless them. And Lord, we pray that this meeting will be all that it should be and all that it needs to be. We want you to know that we love you and we honor you. And we seal this prayer in Jesus' name. Amen.
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 Thank you.
Thank you, Pastor Edwards. The first item on the agenda will be recognitions, and first thing I have is a proclamation recognizing Red Ribbon Week from Mayor Kilgore. I'll read the proclamation. Whereas alcohol and drug abuse in this nation have reached epidemic stages, and whereas it is imperative that visible, unified prevention education efforts by community members be launched to eliminate the demand for drugs, and whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign offers citizens the opportunity to demonstrate their commitment to drug-free lifestyles, which means no use of illegal drugs, no illegal use of legal drugs. And whereas the National Red Ribbon Campaign will be celebrated in every community in America during Red Ribbon Week, October the 23rd through the 31st. And whereas business, government, parents, law enforcement, media, medical institutions, religious institutions, schools, senior citizens, service organizations, and youth will demonstrate their commitment to healthy, drug-free lifestyles by wearing and displaying red ribbons during this week-long campaign. Now, therefore, I, Bobby G. Kilgore, Mayor of the City of Monroe, do hereby proclaim October 23rd through 31st, 2021 as Red Ribbon Week in the City of Monroe, and encourage its citizens to participate in drug prevention education activities, making a visible statement that we are strongly committed to a drug-free state. In witness whereof, I have hereunto set my hand and caused the seal of the City of Monroe to be affixed this first day of October 2021. Bobby G. Kilgore, Mayor. Someone here from the Red Ribbon group for me to present this to?
Oh, we'll get public comment.
I'm sorry.
Sign up, public comment,
Okay, the public comment period is set aside to receive comments from the public in accordance with North Carolina General Statutes. A public comment on a matter that is or has been the subject of a public hearing is not permitted under City Council's public comment rules. The deadline to submit written comments was 3 p.m. on October the 11th, 2021. Council did not receive any comments. I will now recognize those individuals who have signed up to speak. Please remember to provide your name and address for the record when you approach the podium. And first off, we've got who lives at 811 GW Broom Road? Looks like Leyva, L-E-Y-V-A. Would they be in the next room, perhaps?
He's checking.
David's looking. Michael, Latham.
It could be Michael.
Well, they appear to be here for item 22, which I think
Oh,
Is not this.
this is not, yeah, they've gotten confused.
okay.
Mayor Pro Tem, I believe they're asking, they've said they're speaking on the Citizens Appointment Committee recommendations, but if not, if they are, if the person is in, has the person walked in? He's here,
Okay.
if he wants to speak.
Are you wanting to make public comments or speak on item 22? Are you wanting to speak on item 22? Okay, that'll come later. That was-
Actually, but you go ahead. No, it's not a subject of a public hearing. He can talk about this item.
Okay.
If he-
If you would give your name and address for to the clerk, please.
My name is Michael Leva. I live at 811 GW Room Road in Monroe. Board members, good evening. During the August board meeting, I had asked the board to address item number 20 from the July meeting. This was about the position for the Public Safety Committee with only one candidate on the docket. I had even mentioned that one council member, had spoken up and stated before the vote for it to be delayed. Ms. James. She stated there seems to be politics being played and being placed before the people of Monroe. I asked the council to look at this, look into their conscience, and to correct this mistake. Tonight, I've looked at the agenda, and not only do I see that it is item number 22 on the docket, but I have discovered that a meeting was held and that the late entry candidate that was revealed after the fact, when the voting and the applications were closed, had been identified. I'll address that in a moment. So it looks like that Ms. James was correct. Personal agendas are being used instead of doing what is right for the citizens of Monroe. Now, Mr. Holloway stated last month during a meeting of the candidates on the 27th of September that he would, and I'm paraphrasing this a tiny bit, do what the citizens of Monroe wanted. Well, the people want this committee seat to be filled not with the other candidate only that has suddenly been found, keyword found, but with the one candidate that is qualified, who submitted everything that needed to be done in time, not someone who appears to be selected after the fact. If you do this without this being considered, then how are the citizens of Monroe and Union County supposed to trust any decision made? The committee will appear to be deceitful and untrustworthy, and as someone once told me many years ago, perception is reality, regardless if it is the truth or not. Now, it is my understanding that during that meeting that Ms. Anthony recommended that Mr. Janishek be recommended to be voted on, but was unable to secure a second motion from either Mr. Holloway or Mr. Gordon. The candidate, Selena Campbell, does not come from any law enforcement background, but does have an active role in the community, mentoring young adults with her nonprofit organization that makes an impact on middle school youth. Although her story is an inspiration to the community and the kids she impacts, it should be noted that there can be more than one seat opened for this committee.
We're going to get over to now.
I'm almost done.
Okay.
Give me 30 seconds,
That's
please.
fine.
This would bring the committee total to an odd number for the seats and would eliminate any possibility for gridlock for a tie between the committee members. So that I ask that one of you step up and make this right. Make the motion to bring this topic to a vote tonight. And at the very first opportunity it can be made, and put Mr. Janishek on board that committee. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Next to speak is Loretta Malencon. Loretta?
She's in the other room.
You'll be next after her.
Speakers on the other one include use. I don't know if you speak up.
Hi, I'm in the peanut gallery. My name's Loretta Melanson, 2923 Meadow Creek Lane, Monroe. I am overwhelmed by the number of new residences that have already been approved. I am double worried about all of those that are on the docket right now and that will be in the near future. I know that our city is prepared in terms of certain infrastructure, the water, the sewer, the utilities. I know we've been forward thinking about that, but some of the things that the city has no control over, those DOT highways. I've been trying to get an intersection by my house improved for over 10 years now that I've been here. And it may go on a list, and then if it's on a list, it may be another 10 or 15 or 20 years before they get to it. What's going to happen with all these new subdivisions? So rather than try to speak to everything that's on the docket tonight, I'm just going to say this in general. I am very much opposed to the rate of growth. I'm told we have about 7,000 new homes already approved, and we're looking at another 3,500. I'm not sure how many residences we have right now, but where I got the information says we could be doubling the number of homes here in Monroe. And our streets, I know, can't handle it, even if all the other infrastructure can. So let's not put the cart before the horse, please. Thank you.
Michelle King, please.
Good evening. My name is Michelle King. I live at 802 East Franklin Street in Monroe, North Carolina. Good evening, everyone. Good evening. This evening, I want to take 3 minutes and speak with you about preserving open space, farmland, natural beauty, and the critical environment areas of Monroe, North Carolina. Open space refers to natural areas that provide important community space, habitat for plants and animals, and recreational opportunities, as well as working farmlands, places of natural beauty, and critical environment areas. Open space preservation supports smart growth goals by bolstering local economies, preserving critical environmental areas, and improving community quality of life. Monroe must save the open spaces that its residents treasure. Protection of open space provides many fiscal benefits, including increasing local property value and preventing local tax increases. Supplies of high-quality open space also ensure that prime farmlands are available to our local foods and goods. Open space provides significant environmental quality and health benefits. It protects animal and plant habitats, places of natural beauty, and working lands. The preservation of open space benefits the environment by combating air pollution, noise pollution, and erosion control. Open space also protects surface and groundwater resources by filtering trash, debris, chemical pollutants before entering our water system. I challenge you, Mayor, City Councilmen, and City Councilwomen, as long as you're in this place of leadership, show us evidence that you want to make Monroe sustainable. We haven't seen this kind of growth in 10 years or more. As you collaborate with developers, and yes, I am pro-development, good development. As you collaborate with those individuals, I ask you to preserve open space, farmland, natural beauty, and critical environment areas. Do it for us all. Do it for generations to come. It's vital to our city's sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you. I'd like to recognize Interim City Manager Brian Bourne to present the consent agenda.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem. Can everyone hear? Am I good with this mask on? The City Council uses a consent agenda to consider items that are non-controversial and routine. The consent agenda is acted upon by one motion and vote of the council. The consent agenda contains the following items. Item number 3, an annexation request and related zoning public hearing calls for property containing 340.514 acres located on Marion Lee Road, US Highway 601, and White Store Road. The public hearing will be held on November 9th, 2021. Item C, 3C, we have a call for another public hearing to be held on November 9th to consider zoning map amendment request and a text amendment request to rezone properties located along Marion Lee Road, US Highway 601, and White Store Road from the City of Monroe R20 and Union County RA40 to conditional district the Greenway at Lake Lee in order to develop a 689-lot, single-family residential subdivision and to consider as part of the public hearing a water and sewer developer agreement for the project. Item 4, appropriation of undesignated fund balance. We have a budget amendment for street resurfacing. This is approval of a budget amendment in the amount of $1 million to provide additional funding for additional street resurfacing. B is a capital project budget ordinance for fire station number 6. This is approval of a budget ordinance in the amount of $5 million to provide funding for fire station number 6. Item 5, a budget amendment for Monroe Science Center honoring Dr. Christine Mann Darden. This is to adopt a budget amendment in the amount of $87,670 to cover the cost of design, fabrication, and installation of the Monroe Science Center honoring Dr. Christine Mann Darden signage. Item 6, these are called for public hearings to be held on November 9th. We have A, historic landmark designation. This is a call for a public hearing to be held on November 9th to consider the request by the Union County Historic Preservation Commission for historic landmark designation of 505 South Church Street, known as the Hill Wolf House. The designation includes the building, grounds, and portions of the interior. B, this is a call for a public hearing to be held on November 9th for a zoning map and text amendment required to rezone properties located along Old Charlotte Highway from R20 residential and GB general business to conditional district Regent Pines in order to develop 173 attached townhomes and to consider as part of the public hearing a water and sewer developer agreement for the project. C, another public hearing to be held on November 9th for a zoning map and text amendment request to rezone properties located along North Rocky River Road from R20 and conditional district John Haven Townhomes to R20 and conditional district John Haven Townhomes Amendment 1 in order to develop 54 attached townhomes. The applicant is requesting to rezone the remaining portion of parcel 09342-117 back to the R20 designation. D, this is another call for a public hearing on November 9th to consider a zoning map and text amendment for the property located along West Highway 74 from conditional district Seacrest Place to conditional district Seacrest Price Road Site. in order to develop a 156-unit multifamily one-story apartment complex. Item 7, this is to certification of tax base and tax charge for 21 fiscal year 22. To authorize the Mayor Pro Tem to execute the order of collection order authorizing the tax collector to collect the 2021-22 tax levy. The tax levy for fiscal year 22 is $21,996,194.97. Item 8, Charlotte Monroe Executive Airport Apron Rehabilitation Project. This requests approval of change order number 1, the final, to contract with Blythe Brothers Asphalt LLC in the amount of $87,200.52 for the apron rehabilitation project. That's areas A, B, and half of C at the Charlotte Monroe Executive Airport, and authorize the interim city manager to execute any and all necessary documents. Item 9, minutes and reports. First, we have disbursement of fiscal year 21-22 City Council discretionary funds. Council member Serluda Anthony dispersed $130 to the Community Shelter of Union County. Council member Angelia James dispersed $500 to the Keeper Program, $500 to Monroe High School Athletic Foundation, and $1,000 to Helpers One to Another. 3, Councilmember Lynn Keziah dispersed $350 to Monroe Country Club for the Monroe High School Girls Golf Team 2021 Fall Season Team Fee. B, we have financial reports for August of 2021. We have an unassigned general fund balance of $10,737,489 and an assigned fund balance of $2,800,395. Items C through G are various committee and board minutes and reports. Item 10 is regarding ordinances. This is an ordinance to temporarily close certain state-maintained roads for the Union County Christmas Parade held each year in downtown Monroe on the Sunday before Thanksgiving. This is per North Carolina General Statute 20-169. B is to temporarily close state-maintained roads for the Christmas tree lighting event to be held December 4th, 2021. This is an ordinance to temporarily close certain state-maintained roads to hold the 2021 Christmas tree lighting on Sunday, December 4th, 2021. 11 is to honor retiring employee Don Donahue. He's retiring police captain Don Donahue by awarding him his service sidearm and adopting a resolution in appreciation for his service to the city of Monroe. Item 12, tax releases for July 2021 and August 2021. Total tax releases for July were $264.85. There were no releases for the month of August. These releases were created by a change or reduction in the value of the city of Monroe by the Union County tax assessor. Item 13 is wastewater treatment plant equalization basin improvement project. This is to award the contract to Dellinger Inc. in the amount of $5,017,532 and authorize a 5% contingency, and also authorize the interim city manager to execute all the necessary documents. Also, for approval is a budget ordinance in the amount of $1,375,608 to increase the project budget due to the complexity of the project, NCDEQ permitting changes, a very difficult contractor labor market, significant cost increases due to material shortages, COVID labor shortages, and other factors. That concludes the consent agenda items.
I move to
I
approve
got
the
a question.
consent. You have a question?
Can we pull number 5, please? For discussion.
Number 5.
Budget amendment.
Number
Yes.
5 for discussion. is what you
Correct.
said?
Yes.
Okay?
Mayor Pro Tem, if you would entertain a motion for approval of the remaining items other than number 5, and then it would be appropriate to then discuss number
Okay,
5.
do we have a motion to,
I'll restate the motion to approve the items with the exception of number 5.
we have a motion, do we have a second?
I'll second that.
Okay, motion and second, all in favor, raise your hand, please. Motion passes. Now, budget amendment 5.
Yes. I'm looking at that, who can present that, Brian?
I think Pete can speak to that.
Good afternoon, Mayor and Council. Yes, ma'am.
Yes. So looking at that, what makes up that $87,670 for that budget amendment?
So it's two pieces. There was the original piece with the architect to come up with all the conceptual designs. And I'm going by memory, but I believe that was about $19,000 for the architect to come up with the conceptual. And then the additional money is for the actual fabrication, construction, and installation of that signage.
Okay. And then I guess for the signage, are we just putting her name on it? Are we putting Monroe Science Center and honoring Christina Doran on the side?
The Monroe Science Center honoring Dr. Christine Mann Darden.
On all sides?
So it's on the Windsor Street side, it's on the Franklin Street side, and it's on the, as you walk under on the big yellow as you come into the facility as well. And once this is approved, we will actually put it out to bid. We do have a 10% contingency in there as well.
Okay. All right. Thank you.
Yes,
For
ma'am.
clarity, so you're saying it's going to be Monroe Science Center honoring Dr. Christine Darden on all sides?
So on the two sides, on the Windsor Street and Franklin Street, it will, but on the front, you've got the lighted letters, and then honoring Dr. Christine Mann Darden on the yellow as you're coming into the facility.
Gotcha.
And the two sides, they will be lit up as well.
Okay, and it'll read the same thing, Monroe?
Yes, sir.
Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
I move to approve number 5.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank
Second.
you so much.
Have a motion to approve, second.
Second.
Motion to approve and second. All in favor of approving item 5, raise your hand, please. Thank you very much. Okay, now, we'll go into the regular agenda. Public hearings, if you had sent a request in that came in too late and would like to sign up to speak to one of the items that's on our agenda, you're welcome. I think you've already signed up, so you're probably okay with that. Okay, first is item 14. The applicant has advised city staff that they would like to have this item continued to the November 9th, 2021 council meeting without further advertising. At this time, I'll entertain a motion to continue this item to the November 9th council meeting.
So move.
Councilman James, second.
And hold on, and if the maker of the motion would also agree that it would be to continue it to the November 9, 2021 council meeting without further advertising.
Okay. Motion to include without further advertising.
Councilman James, second.
Okay, a motion made and seconded. All in favor, raise your hand, please. All right, motion carries.
Go ahead and tell people
I'm sorry.
the Willoughby Park item is continued to November 9.
Okay.
They're here to speak on it.
Yeah, if anyone's here to speak on the item, which is the Willoughby Park, since it's continued, you're welcome to stay, or you're certainly, welcome to leave if you'd like at this time.
We have a sign-up sheet, so we're good.
Okay, now we're going to 15. Okay, item 15 is annexation and zoning map text amendment request for properties containing 80.518 acres located along Weddington Road and Rocky River Road. This is tax parcels 09375, 014, 09375, 015, 09375, 015B, and 09375, 015C to be rezoned from Union County R20 to conditional district villages at Rocky River West.
Councilman James got a statement. Could David LaCour, the Director of Energy Service, come and talk about the shortage of transformers before these developments are presented?
I didn't understand the question, though, did you?
Could David LaCour come and talk about the shortage of the transformers before these developments are presented?
Okay, sure.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, Council. We have an issue with the supply of transformers that will affect some new residential subdivisions under construction. However, we're not sure what the impact will be at this time. We have many on order, and the orders have been delayed until February. We have installed all the transformers that we have available at this time, and there is still room for some continued growth. There's a lot of factors that play into that: the weather, the speed of construction, the availability of construction materials. All of that will play into how this whole thing plays out over between now and February 2022. We are expected to get a delivery in February 2022. We're also looking at purchasing some surplus transformers from another city that will hopefully help us make do in the interim time. So at this time, I can't say specifically what the impact will be. We are hoping it will be minimal, but again, there's a lot of factors that go into play on that.
So, Council, so there's nothing in writing that we have saying February 2022 is the date? Is that an estimate that we're going off, or is it fact?
We have heard from the supplier. We placed orders in February, March, April, and May. They were supposed to start arriving September, October, November, and December. In July, the manufacturer notified us that they were not going to be able to meet that time frame due to raw material shortages and labor issues. And they've now told us it will be February 2022 before those arrive. And that's the best information we have today. Of course, the manufacturer can delay it again depending on the circumstances.
So this will affect any decisions that we make going forward, that we approve any new development for residential, is that correct?
Not necessarily. The subdivision that's on the table now is not served by the city of Monroe, so we have no impact on us at that time.
Mr. Barber,
Taking that,
with the shortage, are we hopeful that other municipalities will support us in our efforts to gain some of these transformers while we wait till February?
Unfortunately, we have some different voltages in the city of Monroe than the other cities in the state. We're one of the only cities that have 13,200 volt lines and 34,500 volt lines. All the other cities operate on a lower voltage, so we can't really rely on the other cities in the state to help supply our need. And we're not the only cities with this issue. It's a nationwide shortage, so it's not unique to Monroe.
Gotcha.
We're doing all we can to find rebuilt, reconditioned, surplus items so that we can fill that gap until we can get the new items in.
I'd like for us to consider tabling the public hearings that are pending for new development at least until February, being the condition we're in with the lack of transformers, and there's no way to predict it, whether or not they will be here then or not. And I don't think we can make an informed decision based on that.
I'll second that.
Motion made to, hold, you said to serve by the
Postpone consideration until February of the public hearings currently on the agenda.
Or would that be without further advertising?
That's correct, without further advertising.
I'll second that.
Any discussion?
Yeah, I would like to ask David a question. David, this February date, current status of your transformer? And I know that you've stated in this also that it will delay some further development in developments that are under or in construction and or completing now. And how sure or unsure are you of attaining anything else? And then would it be your advice that we should delay these developments, which are future growth? They're not going to be built tomorrow, and most of them probably would be beyond February. So would you suggest that that's necessary at this time or not?
I really am not in a position to advise you on whether you should approve or not. What I can tell you is we have existing subdivisions that are under construction. The current phases of those subdivisions, they are taken care of with transformers for now. As they develop new phases, which will be more toward the December, January timeframe, then there is a possibility we may not have a transformer as those houses begin to develop. We're working with the City of Homestead, Florida, trying to purchase some surplus transformers from them. They have 20 transformers available. If we can get that purchased, then that should stem the tide until February. So I don't expect a large impact from this shortage. There again, the caveat being it's a very fluid situation and anything can happen between now and then.
Mayor Pro Tem, would the maker of the motion agree that the motion is only limited to items 15, 16, and 17? Because 18 is not a development-related public hearing. Would it also govern item 14? Because you've continued that to November. Does the maker of the motion wish to limit it to 14, 15, 16, and 17?
Yes, I would limit it to everything but 18.
Would the person who seconded the
Yes.
motion agree to that?
Yes.
Okay, so
So you said 14, 15?
we said 14,
All of
15, and
them.
16,
14, 15, 16, and 17.
17 also?
That's because 17 is a zoning text and map amendment for conditional district. Actually, it would not be for
That would
17.
not-
Sorry, it would not be for 17. It would only be 14, 15, and 16,
Right,
as 17 is not development
right.
related.
Do we service all of these three that we're talking about? Is that our territory, or is that Duke, or
Forgive me, I'm not familiar with the three that you're speaking of. I know the one that's up here now, the Rocky River West, we do not serve that. But I don't have it in front of me.
1107 Parker Street,
Yes, we would serve that one.
and then we have 1657, well, no, that one's off. And then, what's
What?
the other one?
Actually, the Willoughby Park one.
The Willoughby Park, yes.
I'm sorry, let me back up. Rocky River West, we would serve. The Willoughby Park is the one we will not serve.
Okay.
So you don't do 14. You do serve 15, but not 16? 1107 Parker, do you serve that?
We serve Parker Street.
16 is just a general rezone, it's not tied to development.
Okay,
So then all you're now down to is 15.
so it's just 15.
So then would the maker of the motion agree then that, would the maker of the motion modify the motion to only cover item 15?
I will modify the motion to cover item 15. And
A second.
that's the only one.
Okay.
We don't service this one.
Okay, 14, okay.
So 15.
The motion has been modified.
All right, so Mayor Pro Tem, just for clarification, it would be a motion to table item 15 to February 2022.
Had a motion and had a second. Any other discussion? Okay. Those in favor, raise your hand, please. Okay, motion carries. David, I have one additional question just for a second. You were also trying to locate some transformers from municipalities in other areas.
Yes, sir.
Is that
That's number 6.
working out,
There are 20 surplus transformers that we've identified in the city of Homestead, Florida, that we're working with their procurement division now, trying to purchase those.
what about our friendly competitors at Union Electric, Duke Power? Are they in the same boat?
They are, it's a nationwide issue with raw materials and labor.
Thank you very much.
So a question for item number 6, would that be moved to February as well? Does that impact us, David? 505 Church Street.
That would not impact your decision. They currently have electricity.
Okay. Thank you. What about B through D?
That's all on the same property.
We good. Thank you.
Okay. We'll move then to item 16, zoning map amendment request to rezone property located at 1107 Parker Street. That's tax parcel 09238-150A. And residential multifamily to residential high density, and text amendment request to amend Code of Ordinances, Title 15, Land Usage, Chapter 156, Zoning Code Section 156.106, titled Official Zoning Map.
I'm sorry, I got another question. What about number 3 with the Marion Lee Road on Highway 601 on White Store Road?
That's coming up in November.
That was for November.
Yeah, November 9th, that's coming.
Right, but would that impact with the transformers, David?
Yes, the city of Monroe will serve that area with electricity.
So we need to move that to February 2022.
Actually, you can't. You'd have to make another motion, and what you do, you have to make another motion to change the public hearing date from November 9 to then February, if you, because it's not covered by what you've done.
Okay, well, I'll make a motion to move the public hearing from November the 9th to February 2022.
I second that motion.
But that's for item
3.
Item 3.
That was in the consent agenda.
In the consent,
Yes.
so-
That's correct, but what you're doing is, you can do this. It's essentially amending a series of actions, because the consent agenda is multiple separate actions. So they can make that motion, second it, you can discuss it, and make a determination if it is appropriate to do that or not.
I have a motion and a second. Any discussion? All in favor, signify by raising your hand, please.
Was that, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, was that, I believe that was only 3, I didn't see.
Yeah, that was number, item 3.
No, I believe that was, I only saw 3 hands.
4. You saw
Four.
4
Okay,
hands.
I didn't see a 4th and a 5th.
Five.
So that would be a 5-to-1 vote. Councilmember Gordon voted no. Well, actually, you need to call the nays as well to verify that Councilmember Gordon would vote no.
Okay, those opposed, raise your hand likewise, please.
All right, so that is a 5-to-1 vote.
Okay, we have the item 16. This is a public hearing to consider zoning request to rezone the property located at 1107 Parker Street
Please continue to vote.
from residential multifamily to residential high density. The deadline to submit comments, public comments, was 5 p.m. on October the 8th. Council did not receive any written comments. At this time, I'll recognize Planning Department to present this item.
Good evening, Doug Brett in the Planning Department. And this is a rezoning request, general rezone for the property located at 1107 Parker Street. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property from residential multifamily to residential R10. The origin of the property, subject property is outlined in blue and is located along Parker Street. And this is Haynes Street that kind of backs up, and then the Food Line and Sunset would be up there toward the top. This is on map of the area. All the green, teal, whatever, but green is blue, is all residential multifamily. The yellow across the street is R10, as well as this is this conditional district portion is a, part of the conditional district for the vineyard out there. This is the land use plan which promotes it for the traditional development. And the reason the applicant's requesting, because in the residential multifamily, you cannot build a single-family home as is currently zoned, and they're wishing to just build one home on the property because it's only 0.39 of an acre, and that's the reason for the request. The project and the request is consistent with the land development plan. There's an explanation of the land development plan that it promotes as traditional. Traditional does allow a density up to 4 to 10 units per acre, but as I stated, they're just wanting to build one home on the existing parcel. This shows the APO map that we sent out. There were 27 properties notified of this request tonight, and as well as we did post signs on the property. And the properties in blue are the parcels that were notified of the request. Plan board and staff do recommend approval of the request. I'll be glad to answer any questions at this time if you have any of me.
Okay, Doug, you said you notified 27?
Yes, ma'am. 27 properties were notified of the meeting.
Okay, what was the response?
I think we've had a couple calls just generally asking what they were doing and what the reason was, and we just indicated that the potential owner wants to build a house on the property. And that's all we had, just inquiring as to what was going on with it.
So nobody actually expressed whether they were in favor or not?
No, ma'am.
Okay, thank you.
Is the developer here of the property? Would he or she like to speak?
Are we on 16?
So Doug, one more question.
Nobody signed up.
You said you want to go from residential multifamily to residential high density. Does that mean that they can put several homes?
No, the property as is currently zoned R10, it's only large enough to do one home on it.
Okay.
And like I said, if you could do a single-family home in the residential multifamily district, they wouldn't even be going through the process. The sole reason going through the process is strictly to build one home on the property.
Okay, so just one, okay.
Yes, ma'am. Because like I said, the ordinance doesn't allow you to do a single-family home in the multifamily zoning district. So that's the reason for the
Gotcha.
request.
Gotcha.
No one has signed up to speak for or against this, but is anyone here at this time that would like to speak in favor of the project? Is there anyone at this time that would like to speak in opposition to it? If not, I'll close the public hearing and move to take action.
Motion to adopt resolution approving land development plan compliance.
I'll second that.
All right, have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by raising your hand, please. Okay,
Motion to adopt ordinance amending section 156.106.
Did we have a second?
Yes.
Okay, we have a motion and a second. Those in favor, please raise your hand. Okay, motion carries. Okay. Number 17 is a zoning map amendment request to rezone property located at 1657 Pageland Highway from residential single-family R10 to conditional district Ground 40 Pageland Highway. The deadline to submit written comments for the public hearing is 5 p.m. on October the 8th, 2021. Council received one written comment in opposition. At this time, we'll recognize Senior Planner Doug Britt.
Good evening. This is a request for the property located at 1657 Pageland Highway. The applicant is requesting to rezone the property from R10 single-family residential to conditional district Ground 40 Pageland Highway. For interest in the property, such a property is outlined in blue, is located along Pageland Highway. Here at the top of the map, this is Roosevelt Boulevard, Highway 74 in the Hilltop area. The property is currently zoned R10. To the north is business part is zoned GB, as well as up there is GB and conditional district. Across the street, which includes some residential as well as the golf course, is all zoned R20. This is a site plan of the property. The property is approximately 13.4 acres, and there's one house that's approximately 4,200 square feet located on the property. The applicant is requesting the conditional district in order for the property to be utilized for Ground 40, recovering addicts at the location where they would reside. This is the land use map of the area. The area is follows the urban land use classification, which allows 2 to 4 units per acre. But like I said, they're not requesting to build any more structures on their property. They want to use the existing 4,200 square foot house as is to house, participants with ground 40. This is the explanation of the land use plan for the suburban land use category, which does allow 2 to 4 units per acre. And this is the APO map that that shows the properties that were notified. There were 22 properties notified for this request tonight, as well as we did post signs on the property. Staff has not received any calls. I know y'all did receive one email as far as your public forum that was sent in regarding that. Plan board and staff does recommend approval, and I'll be glad to answer any questions. And the only thing, plan board, we did recommend approval, and staff did put a condition on the project, the ground 40 would obtain any and all permits prior to occupying the property. And because, it's a single family home, and for them if they're gonna have more than 5 people live in that home, it has to meet the commercial building code. And it looks like, based on the size, approximately 20 residents could reside in the house, which will require the property to be upfitted to the commercial building code, which requires, some things, and one of the things would be sprinklers, but they would have to go through that if it's approved by council, and they would submit plans to go through that process. And I'll be glad to answer any questions. I know there's representatives from Ground 40 to speak if you have any questions of them as well.
Council, have any questions for Mr. Britt?
Your second comments about more than 5 and upgrade the building does not apply to this application. Is that correct?
Not to this application, but what would happen if city council approves the request and they're going to have more than 5 people living there, they'd have to submit and go through the commercial site plan review process to upfit the house to meet the commercial building code, because once you have more than 5 people in it, it changes from residential nature to commercial nature.
Right.
And let me see, 5 ones that are not related.
Just want to verify.
And Ground 40 understands the procedure should they decide to have more than
They've been made aware that they'll have to submit plans, construction plans, if this is approved by council, to go through that process to upfit.
Mayor.
And they've already done some due diligence about the sprinkler system as well.
I make a motion to adopt resolution approving land development plan.
I second.
We've got people to speak. We still have people.
I'm sorry.
Want to speak if they want to put it to motion?
Well, we've also got one against.
Yeah.
I'm going to just stand up here if y'all have any questions. I think y'all know it. I don't want to drag this night out.
We do.
So, yeah, if y'all have any questions or if there's any opposition.
I make a motion to close the public hearing.
I second
We did that with people still speaking.
There are actually people here that have signed up to speak on it, therefore, you can't
Okay,
close the
we'll
public
do
hearing
that.
if the speakers wish to speak.
Yeah. You've been in opposition?
If they would like to waive that, we've got,
Yeah, we're all good.
Well, actually, hold on, I'm sorry. It's good that you're telling us, but if you could tell us your name so the
Oh, yeah,
board
there you
can
go.
cross you off the list.
Cody Honeycutt,
I'm good.
Gary Stickley,
I'm good.
Matthew Skanga, Danny Wright,
He's good.
and Boykin?
Oh,
Okay.
Early Boyd. You good? Will?
Okay.
Is there any opposition?
Are there any questions for Mr. Kazar?
Mayor, I'm gonna make it again, motion to adopt resolution approving
Actually,
land
hold on,
development.
you still have,
No, we've got, thank you, Wesley.
There are some people signed up against it. They have to be given an
Now we
opportunity.
need to get Loretta
I didn't know that.
back for opposition. Would y'all get Loretta, please?
He's right there.
Okay, I'm having trouble knowing where we are.
Need a bigger room.
Believe me,
I
you aren't the only
think
one,
We are
Loretta.
at the land usage, establish a unified development ordinance, is that it?
No,
no, ma'am,
No,
this is
we're on
number
number
17.
17.
Ground 40 Pageland Highway, you signed.
Oh,
up
I
in
must have
opposition
signed
on
the wrong paper, I'm sorry.
no problem.
I'm sorry.
No problem.
Yeah, thank you.
Mayor Pro Tem, I would ask you to ask if there's anyone here to speak in opposition.
Is anyone here to speak in opposition to this? Okay. We've got a motion and
Actually, you need
No,
to
we-
now, you need to now
now-
close the public hearing.
We close the public hearing then and call for action.
Mayor, I will make this motion for the third time. Motion to adopt resolution approving land development plan compliance.
I second it for the third time.
All right, we got a motion and a second. All those in favor signify by raising your hand, please. Okay, that's unanimous. Thank you very much.
Motion to adopt ordinance amendment section 156. We're not done. We're not done. We're not done. Motion to
One more
adopt
thing.
ordinance
One
amendment
more.
section 156.106.
Second.
Already got a motion and a second. All in favor, raise your hand, please.
Aye.
Motion to adopt ordinance amending section 156.19.98.
Second.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Those in favor, please signify by raising your hand. Thank you
All
very
right,
much.
come on up.
Now y'all can clap.
Mayor Pro Tem, before you call the next item, can we have a very brief recess? We have to
Good to see you again.
move on, a very brief
problem.
recess.
Folks, we'll take about a 10-minute recess. We'll come back. Oh, okay. We'll come back at 7 o'clock, 4 minutes. How you doing, sir? Thanks for all the good work you do.
Damn idiot.
What are we doing now?
What's up, Ron?
She takes the steps and everything.
No, that's what I'm talking about.
What if we find some transformers, okay? I guess we can come back and redo it.
I just don't like putting stuff on some form. All we're gonna have is a meeting, we're gonna have three meetings.
What I'm thinking about too is build the house, have it ready, just put the transformers.
Yes, ma'am, you
It sounds domain to me.
No, I appreciate that.
I understand if I heard correctly. I've heard that, what's that big grocery store? That would be able to be heard again in February based on transfer, Hey, Doug.
Is that a 10-minute recess?
Yeah, I don't know.
Where are we going?
I don't know.
Would you tell her it's an hour and 15 minutes? Is that when you're shopping, selling,
Yes.
Yeah, it's good.
What exactly are we recessing for?
Tell them that we're trying to fix it.
We're good.
What happened is David Lukeborg got the project transferred. 14 is actually served by us. 15 is all for public hearing. The annotation is presented to the November 9th. 14, we need to could table that without further advertising. So it's going to be confusing, but I will be happy. Oh, no, I think you're better off.
Hey, folks, our break's over. If you would take your seat, please.
What about it? Oh, for real? Just, so we do not service this one?
We do not service
Wait,
villages.
okay.
Villages and properties.
So, okay, we don't, okay, gotcha.
Ladies and gentlemen, we thank you for your patience. When you're dealing with this many projects and as much as all the logistics that go into it, sometimes things get transposed. And I'm going to let our city attorney, Mr. Chacon, kind of go over what has just transpired here, and we're going to put everything in its proper place.
Thank you, Mayor Pro Tem Holloway. What we have learned is you had heard that item 15 had been continued to February due to it would be something that the city would provide power to, and the transformer issue could conceivably have an impact. It turns out Union Power provides power to that, not us. We provided to 14, which was only continued to November. So what we would ask the council to do is for item 15 to call for a public hearing for annexation and a zoning map text amendment request for item 15 to be held on November 9, 2021. And then after that, a second motion for item 14 to table item 14 to the February 2022 council meeting without further advertising. That will mean we'll have the right ones. The one that receives power from the city will be a February item, which will be now 14, and then 15 will be heard in November, which is it gets this power from Union Power. So I understand that may be confusing, but unfortunately, when the information was given to you by the Energy Services Director, the projects were transposed. So, Mayor Pro Tem, staff would suggest a motion on item 15 to call for a public hearing on the annexation and zoning map text amendment request to be held on November 9, 2021. That would be what we would first ask for.
Do we have a motion for that?
So move.
Have a motion, second? Do we have a second on the motion?
You get a second from Councilmember James.
I'm sorry, have a motion and second.
Yeah, I have a question.
Sure,
I
ma'am.
know this is without further advertising, so those people that want to speak to that, can they sign up now, or do they need to wait?
Actually, Councilmember Anthony, it would be advertised for item 15 because you had actually moved it out to February.
Okay.
So because people who might have been aware of it were thinking February may have left, we think it's important to re-advertise
Okay.
it and advertise it for the November date. So normally we wouldn't do that, but it is appropriate to do that in this case.
Okay, so 15, we're talking about the Rocky River, the 80.518 acres along Rocky River, villages at Rocky River. We're going to do it in November, but you will have an opportunity for public comment.
That is correct. Every individual will have an opportunity to send in either written comments or appear in person.
Okay. You have a motion and a second. All in favor? Raise your hand, please. Okay, that carries. Thank you.
And then Mayor Pro Tem Holloway, for item 14, we would ask that that item be tabled to the February 2022 council meeting without further advertising. It is currently tabled, item 14 is currently tabled to November, but what we would ask to do is to make it clear that it is now tabled to the February 2022 council meeting.
Councilman James make a motion
Okay,
to
second.
table to February 22.
Councilmember James made that motion, Mayor Pro Tem, and Councilmember Anthony seconded.
Okay, we have a motion and a second on the floor. All in favor, raise your hand, please. Thank you very much.
Thank you for allowing us to do this.
Thank you. Excuse me, this is a public hearing to consider zoning request to rezone the properties located in the city limits of Monroe to establish a unified development ordinance. The deadline to submit written comments for the public hearing was 5 p.m. on October the 8th, 2021. Council received 3 written comments in opposition. At this time, I'll recognize Planning and Development Director Lisa Steinwinter to introduce this item.
Good evening. I'm Lisa Steinwinter, Director of Planning and Development with the City of Monroe. I would like to bring before you a request to consider a zoning map amendment to rezone properties located within the city limits and the extraterritorial jurisdiction, and a text amendment to amend the Code of Ordinances Land Uses Chapter 157 to establish a new Unified Development Ordinance. The rewrite to the Unified Development Ordinance and zoning map update has been branded as the Transform Monroe project. The purpose of this project was to develop a clear and user-friendly Unified Development Ordinance that is consistent with city's plans and policies and implements the relevant goals and recommendations from the Ford Monroe Land Use and Transportation Plan that was adopted in April 2018. The Land Use and Transportation Plan that was adopted was designed to be the city's blueprint for development, its growth strategy, and the foundation upon which future land use and transportation decisions are based. The plan responded to existing challenges, anticipated future needs, and prepared the community to accommodate future growth. Ford Monroe, the land use plan, also included an action plan that provides a set of recommendations that provides guidance for implementing the vision for future growth and development. The action plan recommends approximately 6 action items in the new Unified Development Ordinance and zoning map that will serve to address if approved. I'm not going to go over all 6 of those, but the most important one was to complete Transform Monroe, the rewrite to the new Unified Development Ordinance, and update our zoning map. To establish zoning standards that assist in implementing the future land use plan. The City of Monroe's existing Unified Development Ordinance and zoning map dates from 2003 and does not reflect the best zoning and planning practices. With the adoption of the Land Use and Transportation Plan, it is essential that a new ordinance responds to community values, goals, policies, and strategies identified in the Land Use Plan update. Planning staff, with the assistance of Kimley Horn and Associates, which is a national planning and engineering firm, have been working to develop a new Unified Development Ordinance and to update our zoning map that will serve to address the following goals. One is to provide a more predictable set of land use regulations for the community, developers, and city officials by increasing the resilience on provisions of the ordinance instead of special legislative approvals. Eliminated outdated, unclear, or contradictory language within the ordinance. Update the format and structure to include graphics and illustrations and to be more user-friendly. Include mixed-use, overlay, commercial, industrial, and residential districts that will help the city to achieve both high-quality greenfield projects and high-quality infill and redevelopment projects. And also to incorporate new and innovative zoning and land development strategies within the ordinance. The Transform Monroe is the city's new Unified Development Ordinance, if adopted, and is our consolidated document that contains all of the city's land use and development standards or requirements. The new Unified Development Ordinance is consistent with our future land use plan. The land use plan identified a vision including land use character areas. The character areas form the basis of the proposed zoning districts. The land uses within the proposed zoning districts are consistent with what was adopted in the Land Use and Transportation Plan. And the proposed Unified Development Ordinance and zoning map update is a reasonable use and in the public interest because it is one of the most important tools to implement your vision of how you grow in development for the next 20, 30 years. Public notification. Planning staff and Kimley Horn Associates held 4 open house public workshops in various areas of the city in which every property owner and within the city limits as well as the extraterritorial jurisdiction was mailed an invitation. The purpose of the workshop was to discuss the proposed ordinance and rezoning as well as receive feedback from the public. A project website was created titled Transform Monroe that contains all draft documents including the proposed zoning map and draft ordinance sections for review and comment. There has been approximately 20 rezoning notification signs posted throughout the city in various locations. Well, more than 10 days prior to the public hearing now. They've been posted since before the September meeting. And half-page ad was placed in the Inquirer Journal on October 2nd and October 9th. And a legal notification ran in the Inquirer Journal on October 2nd and October 9th. Sorry for that error. And an official rezoning notification letter was mailed to all property owners within the Monroe city limits as well as the extraterritorial jurisdiction and all adjacent properties within 150 feet prior to the public hearing, both in September as well as in October. I'd like to now turn it over to Kelly Klepper with Kimley Horn and Associates to provide a brief presentation for you.
What he's carrying doesn't look like brief.
Good evening, Mayor Pro Tem, council members. It's a pleasure to be here before you tonight. For the record, Kelly Klepper with Kimley Horn, and I'm our team's project lead for the update of the Unified Development Ordinance and the zoning map, and one responsible for working directly, most directly and closely related to your staff as well as the interested persons throughout this process. As Lisa said, we've been at this for some time. We lost a little bit of time for COVID. We've had several workshops. We've had joint meetings with the planning board. We've had some very spirited discussions. We've had a lot of back and forth. We've had several series of email questions going back and forth as to what does certain things mean, what are we doing, what about this standard, or how does this apply? So there again, as Lisa has said, there's been quite a bit of information distributed. There's been a lot of discussion in the public forum, especially where we've had those joint workshops between this body as well as the planning board. So as Lisa said, I'm going to go through a brief presentation. However, I'm going to encourage and ask you all that if there are specific questions as we get to a section, please let me know, because what we've got in here is very, very simplified. We did not try to provide that in this presentation, otherwise we'd probably be here a couple of days. So what we're going to do is kind of walk through a few things. And as Lisa said, what we're talking about, what we're calling is Transform Monroe, building off of the Forward Monroe, that land use and vision plan that the city adopted several years ago. What we're going to do tonight is kind of walk through some of the summary components of the UDO, as well as ask for, there again, based off of the recommendations for approval of the UDO and the zoning map. So what is Transform Monroe? As Lisa said, back in 2018, we actually started the process going from Forward Monroe to where we are tonight. The biggest thing we wanted to make sure of, and when we started this process, and we'll talk about this in just a second, is we relied on the Forward Monroe as well as the city's current Unified Development Ordinance as the baseline for what we're doing and why. And you'll see as we talk through some of this and as we've talked previously, what we found was that there was a lot of things that needed to be updated, not only from a statutory standpoint, thanks to the North Carolina general standards being updated and what we call 160D. But there again, there's other things that we identified where we just basically said, what about this? Why isn't this being regulated? How do you actually apply this type of standard? So we went through and did, in essence, a diagnostic of the city's current UDO as well as the Land Development Code itself. So where are we in the process? There again, we've gone through the identification as far as what are the foundations for the proposed UDO, the development, the refinement, further refinement, as well as the public outreach components. And we're at step number 4 tonight with the hopeful adoption of the UDO. As we discussed previously, the existing UDO that you have on the left had 18 individual sections, and what we identified early on was that several of these sections were either redundant or could be consolidated, combined with other portions of the specific UDO. At the same time, we also started to identify that there were like terms that were not identified, or they were provided in various sections of the UDO. So we said, let's simplify it, let's make it easier to kind of follow, let's put like things in like sections. Hence the reason you see 11 sections moving forward, each with kind of a broad-based approach and statement. What are some of the major changes? As Lisa said, we did the creation of the mixed-use districts based off of those character areas from Forward Monroe. We provided updated parking standards, signage standards, including the illustrations. We also incorporated and recommended changes to include non-residential design standards, whether it's for commercial as well as industrial, and also multifamily. And then under certain instances where there are those conditional districts, single-family residential standards that could be considered as part of a project moving forward. We also provided and prepared a series of landscape and buffer standards where there were none before. And we'll talk about that a little bit more. And then also use definitions. So what we did there was to identify specific uses, and if there were categories or characteristics that needed to be applied for each of those uses, identify those directly into the UDO. So if we're talking about a drive-through or something of that nature, we understand exactly what we're talking about and how to apply a specific standard. And then more importantly, we're also been looking at with the city attorney and the outside legal counsel, very much appreciative, consistency with Chapter 160D. So what does 160D do? Of course, there's a couple of things that it does. This is not the complete list, but it basically says that we eliminated combined conditional use and special use districts. We can utilize form-based codes moving forward. The conditional zoning districts requires consent. There are standards for administrative approval, and there are also identified links associated with various permits as identified within the code itself. So in the interest of time, like I said, we're just going to go through each of the sections. There again, if you have a specific question on one of these, please feel free to stop me. Section 1 was just kind of, I'll say, the administrative components, what it is, what we're doing, why we're doing it, and kind of that general legal reference. Also, there's information in there regarding transitional provisions because, as we all know, we're going from an older UDO that's slightly outdated or may have conflicting statements to a new. So what we've said is, here's the way we're kind of bridging that gap. And that section outlines, I'll say, the administrative provisions for that. Section 2 defines this and ties it back to Forward Monroe. So basically, how are we tying the UDO to your previously approved land use and transportation plan? So we talk about how we are implementing those key goals of the comprehensive plan, the land use plan, into the UDO itself. 3 gets into the specific administrative components. What you're doing, how you do it, what are the specific application requirements, what are the agencies or the review bodies that are going to be doing each of those types of applications, and what is the expectation moving forward, including a series of flow charts that allows the user to understand everything from informal meetings with staff all the way through to, in this case, coming before the council as part of any sort of formal adoption. Each process that the city utilizes as part of a land use and development is identified with the exclusion, of course, of annexation, which has a separate statutory component. So there again, we've identified the who, what, when, and why for every type of application that the city undertakes. Section 4, and this is where we really start to dive down deep, is the traditional zoning districts, what we would consider your normal, everyday district. What was once your R40 is now the RR, that rural residential. What was R20 and some of the others is now a low-density residential, so we've made the conversion. There again, the big thing to think about here is we've identified both the residential districts, the commercial districts, industrial, planned, and still the conditional. Now, it's a reason we've identified these as traditional districts, because a lot of these are, I'll say, a straight carryover from what's in the UDO right now. It's been repackaged. The areas on the map, and we'll show you the maps are still basically exactly the same when it comes to that. The standards with respect to density, there are a couple that have been consolidated, but where we had, like I said, the R40, that 1 dwelling unit per acre, is translated into the RR district, and so on and so forth. Similarly, with the commercial as well as the office types of districts, we've repackaged those, re-identified, and provided some additional development standards to go with each of those. The mixed-use districts, this is where we actually created a brand new set of zoning districts that can be utilized and applied in specific areas. What are these and where are these? These are those character areas that Lisa was identifying in the 4 Monroe. So where you have your key intersections, your downtown areas, and some of those other areas where we want to encourage that higher density type of use, right at, I'll say, your major intersections, that mix of uses for residential, commercial, office. Those are the areas that we've identified here as part of a mixed use. And at the same time, we've applied additional design and development standards that not only get into the type of the building and the way certain things are oriented, but also how that building's going to look and function as it relates to the street. So in essence, a mini type of a form-based code, but with a, I'll say, a city context-sensitive application. Just to kind of give you a quick idea, the map, I know it's a little difficult to see with the colorations on here. The white areas are the areas that are not the mixed-use districts, the colorized areas. Everything from the blue, which is your downtown, to your other areas along, like I said, the bypass, along Independence, and of course the medical district. Those are the defined and identified mixed-use areas. They're again consistent with the 4 Monroe Land Use and Transportation Plan. The overlays. The overlays pretty much stayed exactly the same. Why? Because a lot of these are statutory in nature, whether it's a floodplain and floodway, the airport, or some of the historic components, watersheds, and some of your neighborhood. There again, we just repackaged those up and moved them into the overlay section. We did not, other than some minor updates based on new state statutes and or standards. Those areas stayed exactly the same. The uses and standards. We actually took what was in the old UDO and created an entire series of tables that now say these are the specific uses that the city recognizes, where those can be done within each of the zoning districts, and whether or not it is, permitted, prohibited, or anything else. And if there are specific types of things that go with it, whether it are some of those use type definitions or additional standards. So we get in and start actually identifying through the table as well as those use definitions and the additional standards, everything that goes for a specific type of use, all of that is defined and identified in Section 7. This is just a quick example, and there again, this is just a small snippet of the table that you have within your proposed UDO. All the uses go, we'll say, by use type. Down the left-hand side, all of the proposed districts, whether it is the rural residential all the way to the mixed-use districts, run along the top. And then the information on the far right is where you can find that specific use type definition and additional development standards. The supplemental regulations, and this is where we started getting a little bit more creative with some of the components. Why? Because the city didn't have standards for some of this, or what they had was either conflicting with other portions or somewhat vague. So what we identified there was we updated the subdivision and development regulations. This is getting into the platting, the roadways, the stormwater, and things of that nature. Signage. We started to identify specific types of signs and how those signs should be applied. Now, a big component of this, and this is something that the city attorney and the outside legal, and we were all very much attuned to, was making sure that the sign ordinance and the sign portion of this UDO was content neutral. It was not identifying specific types of uses that would be in conflict with the U.S. Supreme Court decisions as it relates to signage these days. There's a whole lot of reading if you ever get bored, but what we did is to make sure that the proposed sign ordinance portion of this is in fact consistent with the Supreme Court's decision. Landscape buffering, fences and walls. What's going on between specific zoning districts? And we're talking about districts. Here with landscaping and buffering, we're talking about trying to minimize incompatibilities between unlike uses. We're not talking about residential to residential. We're talking about residential to commercial, industrial to commercial, industrial to office, where you have those different types of zoning districts with those different uses. What are the specific standards that should be applied as a baseline minimum between those areas? Parking and loading, creating those standards for the parking. Electronic gaming, adult establishments, there again, that's a couple of those things that we just kind of let continue to go because the state already heavily regulates those. Design standards. This is where we got into the residential, non-residential components for specific types of buildings, whether it's a roof line, amount of transparency, how we do our doors, how we do our windows, how we orient the parking lot, and also our interior parking and landscaping components. Open space standards, that pretty much speaks for itself. Lighting standards, how do we measure and how do we identify where we can do not street lights, but parking lot lights or building lot lights. so that we're minimizing that light spillage onto adjacent properties. And then, more importantly, how do we actually define some of these standards, whether it's a setback, a build-to line, your maximum height? All of that is defined in this section right here, including the use of not only the definitions, but also the graphics themselves. Nonconformities, things that just don't fit anywhere else. So basically, we're talking about those uses that are already in existence that will continue to be able to continue. Of course, vested rights are an incredibly important thing. So what we're talking about tonight is, in essence, as redevelopment occurs, new development occurs, they're coming under the new standards. Anybody that has a lawfully approved permit application, that continues to move forward under those standards. And then definitions themselves. So we get into how we define certain key types of terms, whether it's a canopy or in this case like an access, and we've identified the definable terms that we utilize within the UDO in this section. Previously, they were kind of scattered throughout the UDO, but what we did is to consolidate those into one section so that it's easy to understand and go directly to. The zoning map. So your existing zoning map looks much like this, and there again, Lisa actually has a little bit better on the GIS that we can start zooming in and around if need be. But each of the colors represents a specific district, whether it is an R10, an RMH, an OP, or some of the other districts. All of those are identified here. What we did was to basically utilize, and it's a little different scale, so it appears slightly different, but we recolored a lot of the districts. Basic planning is residential is yellow, multifamily is orange, commercial is red. So we started going back to those baseline colors. So there again, you can see all the districts that, as we've identified here, that are now mapped as part of this proposed zoning map. And if you kind of go back and start looking between, there again, which was the same scale and the same placement on the graphic, you would notice that the colors, except all they're a little different, are in the same spot. And that's a major thing to be thinking about, with the exception, of course, of the mixed-use districts themselves. So what we're asking for is the adoption of the UDO as well as the zoning map. And at this point, Lisa and I are happy to answer any questions that you may have.
Councilwoman James, when you talk about eliminating rural zoning, are we talking about eliminating rural zoning?
No, ma'am.
Could you talk a little bit on that, please?
Sure. There was an initial discussion, and there were standards that we had identified. We were looking at the transform Monroe, and there was just low-density residential. However, based off of several discussions, several points of request from residents, we built back in the rural residential utilizing the same standards as the previously adopted R40. So what was identified on the zoning map as R40 is now RR. The zoning standards that were the R40 are now RR in the zoning code itself.
And also mentioned in the UDO, we talk about tree preservation, correct?
Ma'am?
Tree preservation in the UDO?
Yes, ma'am. Tree preservation is a big aspect of this. Buffers, the preservation of certain types of trees, certain size trees. Yes, ma'am. That's all under the proposed UDO as well.
Mr. Clever, let me expand on that to some degree. Because I believe in this, you state, or the UDO itself says that that between residential and residential, there are no buffer requirements. And I have a great number of people, citizens from our ETJ, who are not satisfied with this, and I agree with them. And I believe that we have to come up with something to try to eliminate this clear cutting in the buffer areas. And especially if you have something between residential and commercial, residential and industrial, it doesn't seem out of order to me to have something between two residential subdivisions. And especially when you have a mature subdivision and then you have a newly developed subdivision which may be adjacent to it. And in that area, particularly, I'm thinking of buffers and a number of feet and no clear cutting. Can this not be addressed in this document?
So, Councilman Gordon, just a couple of clarifications. One, there are no districts where we do not require some form of buffering between, even under like zoning districts. So if it is RLD to RLD, so an existing, what was an R20 going up against a proposed RLD, a low density, it is still required to have a type 2 buffer as defined by the code. There's also provisions under section, I believe it's 838, where we talk about tree preservation within the buffers themselves. Now, I will be the first to tell you that based off of topography and other things, that's not always possible, nor is it necessary, well, I'm not going to say necessary, but prudent to always say that that buffer needs to stay exactly where it is, especially if you have invasives. So trees or, types of things, plants that will destroy an oak or the trees that we've identified we want to preserve. So those plant types that actually take over and start destroying the environment, you want to get rid of those.
Right.
But the main trees, the preservation types of trees, though, there's a couple of different things in here that call out for not only a tree preservation plan as part of an overall project, but also talks about the buffer area requirements, what those entail, and also utilizing existing vegetation.
Okay. I don't believe I'm clear. I may be ignorant about it, and that's the reason for my question. So I want to clarify. If we have a mature residential area and a developer buys a piece of property that is adjacent to it, you're telling me then, under this code, they could not go in there and clear cut that land up to the existing property owners?
They could, well, if it was done through the proper permits, they would have to identify what the preservation areas are, and then they still would be required to provide a buffer. And when you say existing neighborhood, we have to look at the zoning. If it is, like I said, what was an R40, or excuse me, we'll say R20, which is now an RLD, that's there now. I come in and I'm going to develop a new RLD development right beside you. I still have to provide a type 2 buffer.
Type 2 buffer is?
A type 2 buffer is actually called out. Type 2 is a minimum of 10 feet, 3 trees per 140 trees, plus a 6-foot tall fence. The fence has to be placed on the interior away from the property line.
If the developer goes in there and clears this land to the other property owner's line, then all he's got to do is come back in there and develop a 10-foot buffer and replant trees?
There's nothing in your code right now that prevents that.
And that's my point. And I don't think that's right, and I want it included in this UDO.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I might.
And I will say that within the buffers, you still have the tree preservation plan too, that if the trees are within a certain size, they're required to be preserved. So they wouldn't necessarily be clear cutting all that down, especially for certain trees that are in a certain diameter and size. They would be preserved.
Everybody in this room knows that it's going on now, and we're not enforcing that.
Mayor Pro Tem, if I might, and the planning director and Mr. Klepper would note that this is approved, what can be done is the UDO is not a static document. It is a living, breathing document. And one thing that can be done is explore the issue of what else can be done with respect to the buffers. And eventually come back to council if there's more that can be done. And I note that you're saying we currently do nothing. Well, what you have now are standards that are specifically identified. Typically what you have is between residential and residential in our current UDO, our current land development ordinance, you have no buffer, really not much in the way of buffer requirements except for erosion control. You have them when you have, say, commercial versus residential. But now we have some more buffer requirements, and we can't continue to explore. The idea is you do not, there's a great phrase, if you do not let the perfect be the enemy of the good. And what we would suggest is you move forward with this, and we as staff work to determine what additional measures can be taken that would help solve that problem. And for those, I'm sorry, I appreciate everyone's concerns, but here's the thing. It's, you don't throw out the baby with the bathwater. And what you have is staff has actually put in something that didn't exist before. There are actual buffers. And I'm sorry, I'm telling you what's in the UDO as it's written. There are actual buffers in it that in the current land development ordinance do not exist. So what we would do is you take this as a start, and because Councilmember Gordon and other council members I think would raise this issue, is ask us to strengthen that. And staff would take that seriously because it is a document that you are agreeing to and want to move forward with, and more changes can be made. Is that fair to say, Madam Planning Director and Mr. Klepper?
Yes, sir, City Attorney, and you do bring up a good point that I wanted to touch on, and I'm sure Mr. Klepper will touch on it as well. But, you know, Kimley Horn and Associates and planning staff have done the best of our ability to draft a new unified development ordinance. This is a 400-something page document. We're not going to get all these ordinance sections right the first time. We won't really identify everything that's working right or not working right until we start applying the ordinance. So we're going to be back before council within the next few months requesting a zoning text amendment to certain sections that we just didn't quite get exactly the way it should. We were thinking or intending it should implement with development. So we're going to be back before this council anyway.
I have a question. Is it possible to have a conditional approval contingent upon addressing the buffer issue?
That's just what
Councilmember
it
Anthony,
is what he just said.
Well, actually, what I would say is if you would approve it, but you direct staff by your consensus. I wouldn't recommend having a vote. I think we hear you loud and clear, that we would come back and work on the buffer issue. That would be the first priority. And the reason I would not encourage a conditional approval is because are you saying the condition is if it's not met, that the entire UDO goes, then what do you replace it with? So the suggestion would be, you approve the UDO, but staff takes your direction that the buffer issue must be handled, and that we come back with some fixes and suggestions within a 90 to 120 day period.
Along with any other issues that we see fit.
Hey, what's in the new UDO?
Right.
What is it addressed in the new UDO, the buffer?
Yes, sir.
Yes, there's
Can
a
you
whole
tell me what it
section on
is?
landscaping and buffering and a whole table of that if you have a residential zoning district that abuts a commercial, what type of buffer you have to comply. The residential to residential is the type 2 buffer that Mr. Klepper mentioned before of how many trees you would have to plant.
How much width are we talking?
It's a 10-foot width.
Can you not stretch that out to 25? Because you're talking about an existing subdivision that needs to be protected.
We would suggest that Councilmember Keziah, I think absolutely that is a thing to look at. It is, however, if you make that change, you want your buffers to be consistent in terms of width and size. And what we'd say is instead of doing it on the fly, is let us take your suggestion and suggestions of any other council members into what might be the right thing. It may be 25 feet, it may be 20, it may be 17 and a half, it could be 30. But the idea is if you would allow us to take a look at that and figure out from a consistency standpoint, because it's not just a residential to residential buffer, it's how you look at it from the residential commercial, from commercial, from everything else. If you would allow us, that would give us an opportunity to work on what would be a solution that would work instead of saying we have this and then it becomes a Frankenstein zoning ordinance and not a unified development ordinance.
If I could kind of echo or ask, can you talk now? Got me tongue twisted. Councilmember Anthony and the city attorney, I just want to bring two things up as we're talking about this. The preservation plan is required as part of the approval process. Removal of trees of a certain size require replacement. It is a 4-to-1 replacement. So if you remove a tree that we'll say is 25 inches, you've got to provide 4 trees of the same type and size on the site itself. So there is a penalty for removing existing trees. The other thing I want to note is that one of the things we were very cautious about was allowing individuals to go back in and we'll say utilize all pines or all red oaks as part of a buffer or an overall preservation component. Based off of the size, the number of trees to be planted, we actually start requiring multiple species so that we have not only the diversity of the trees, so that it's not all trees that are deciduous and lose their leaves in the winter. We've got, we'll say, evergreens as well as that. But we also require a minimum number of different types of species, heaven forbid if something happens to that particular type. So we've taken it to the next level to try to not only require an offset of additional trees, there's in essence penalties, especially along those buffers, but also, as the city attorney noted, we've provided additional standards that you did not have currently in your UDO.
And that's fine. And let me say to you that I've been involved in planning and zoning in this city for 40 years. And I know that what I'm talking about and what you're talking about, to me, don't seem to be the same thing. And what I'm saying to you is this. If there is a new subdivision coming up to an old subdivision, there's no need for that property to be clear-coated to the old subdivision's property line. And then resetting that tree out that's going to take 25 or 50 years to develop. It's being done, and that's all I'm saying. Now, and let me just say this. I agree with the attorney. I agree with our staff. I have confidence in them. All I'm saying is it's an issue that our citizens continually bring up. It's one that needs to be addressed. However we can do it is fine with me, as long as it gets addressed and as long as it's upheld.
Councilmember Gordon, I do want to point out one thing. As development comes to the city, and if the ordinance is approved, we can enforce our landscaping buffer section that provides perimeter buffers, streetscape buffers, buffers between, different zoning districts. What we cannot control is if a developer clear cuts their property for logging purposes before they come to us, which is a lot of what's happening in the city. It's unfortunate, but it is occurring, and we've noticed it. We get the calls as well. But if they clear cut their property before they submit any development, we can't, there's nothing for us to be able to enforce or
well, then this is
apply
a
our
board.
ordinance to then.
Yeah. And so all I'm saying is, then that's our job. We need to deny those people the opportunity to be annexed into our city and to receive our service.
Question, can the UDO address that developers will be denied if they clear cut before they come?
I will say, as the planning director looks at me, we'll look to address that. It may be that is also more of a tree ordinance issue. Our friends in the General Assembly, however, have been limiting your ability to deal with tree issues on private property. So we would be happy to take a look at that to see how it could play with, interact with your UDO. But this is more of a, I think if they're doing it for logging purposes, before they even come to you, there's not a lot we can do in the UDO, but there may be something in an other ordinance, assuming we have the authority to do it. So that's something that we were happy to look at, but do understand that if they do it the way, as Councilmember Gordon has described, do it way before they even come to say, we're going to build here. That may be their intention to, but they don't submit anything. There may be nothing we can do in the UDO, but there may be other mechanisms. So we would, ask you to let us take a look at what we have the authority to do, what we may come back with that can deal with it in more of a general issue from a tree ordinance perspective.
But for clarity, this is a separate issue than the UDO.
This would be, in some cases, it would be a separate issue.
Right.
Yeah.
And I'm not opposed to approving this UDO tonight. Don't get me wrong. All I'm saying is, you ask for people to address things that you had question about. I've got question about this, and I want it addressed. And if it's tomorrow, or next week, or next month, that's fine, as long as it gets addressed.
But as it relates to the UDO,
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
moving forward.
Actually, it's going to be what.
So if the UDI is approved, then it will be approved with directions to address certain portions of it. We will identify what those portions are.
We clearly hear you on the buffer issue, and if there are other things you would like us to look at, we just need to have it clear to the consensus. We would not have you have it, make it part of the approval, but we would view it as you have done over the years, something that is a clear consensus of council is something staff would then act upon.
And Councilmember Anthony, one of the things that we always do when we do these, and Lisa was entirely correct, comp plans are easy. Once you start doing the UDO, these get very technical, very complex. You're not going to get it right the first time. What we identify is literally start creating a list of parking lot items. Based off of what we hear at these adoption hearings, what do we need to go back and make sure we've either addressed, taken care of, or do we need to, as the city attorney said, relook at and strengthen? Now, we've heard very loud and clear, making sure that you cannot clear cut all the way up to the property line. One of the things I want to make sure we are all very clear on is if they do clear cut within that buffer area and there's trees that meet these standards, it's a 4-to-1 replacement. And then we're not talking trees that are the size of my finger. We're talking sizable trees that the director and the staff are then looking at as far as replacements. So there is that de facto penalty in play.
Do you have a certain diameter that you're going by?
To replace if they violate?
It's 4 trees of similar species and size.
I have a question. When was the last time this has been done? When was the last time we've updated our UDO?
03.
Our ordinances dates 2003.
Okay. But this is a great start, in my opinion, to get us started with the transformer for Monroe, with the contingencies of us addressing the buffer issues, which, as we've addressed, is a little bit of a separate issue than the UDO. So with that being said, I'd like to make a motion.
Actually, you still have.
I tried.
Hold on, I got a question. Hey, Councilmember McGee, I mean, if you don't want to hear from the public, that's all on you. I'm sure they really are fine with not having it.
Oh, I got another question for you. Landscaping plan, is there anything in this UDO about landscaping requirements, plans?
Yes, ma'am. Both from a residential as well as a non-residential perspective, a landscape plan is required for all the applications that we identify. It also gets into not only, I'll say, the perimeter buffers, but also building. It requires service and loading areas. It also gets into landscape plans for your parking lots,
Would make your next case.
as well as street buffers and anything including foundation plantings for buildings.
Well, being that you said this is a living, breathing document.
Yes, ma'am. That's what I did say.
Meaning it can be amended.
Yeah, it can always be amended. Your ordinances can always be amended, subject to ensuring that the public has the right to have input, that we advertise it properly, and that we notify that it will be done.
And Councilmember Anthony, the reason council has not seen a lot of zoning text amendments come before you on our current ordinance is because we've been working to develop a new one. Typically, you're going to see zoning amendments to your ordinance periodically, depending on something new that comes up that's not addressed in your ordinance. There's new things and new trends that are coming about that won't necessarily be within your ordinance that will need to amend it for those particular reasons. So you just haven't seen any lately because we've been redoing our overhauling it.
I received that.
Any other questions or comments for?
Yes, last question. For citizens to say that we are city and not rural, can you please explain the rural district? Well, what's the thought behind that?
A couple of different things. Currently you have in place a R40, which is in essence a rural residential standard. One unit for every 40,000, so basically every lot has to be 40,000 square feet. That is a rural standard. It's not an urban standard. You're a city. What we always advocate, especially in a growing area, is to make sure you're right-sizing your districts and your standards. However, there was enough concern by certain members of the planning board, we heard that very loud and clear, as well as the citizens, to make sure we put that back in those protections. So that is the reason the rural residential standards were put into the code that you see and are being proposed here and are mapped on the zoning map.
I would just like to echo to that, because there are some other questions and concerns that we've heard. Are we eliminating 1 acre lots? The R40 is 40,000 square foot lots, which is currently in our ordinance. That's a minimum lot size. Anyone has the ability, whether it's an individual or a developer, to propose a single family lot or a development that's greater than that 1 acre. They can do 5 acre lots. That just sets the minimum square feet of that lot. And as Mr. Klepper said, the R40 existing zoning district has been placed back in the new proposed as the rural residential with the exact same standards.
Thank you so much.
Any other questions or comments from council? Okay, this is a public hearing, and at this time I'll call to the elected individuals that have signed up to speak in favor of the project. I'll just remind each speaker that there is a 3-minute limit, and you'll need to provide your name and address for the clerk. Loretta, you're first up.
That's the one I wanted to say.
Favor.
Loretta Melanson, 2923 Meadow Creek Lane here in Monroe. I want to preface this by saying I have the utmost regard and respect for our planning department. Lisa, Doug, and Carrie have been an invaluable asset for me personally. I've never been involved in this sort of thing before, and I need a lot of explanation and guidance, and they've given it to me. I attended one of the meetings where I just sat in with the company that has been guiding them in this process, and I was very impressed. I also went to one of those 4 meetings where I have to say I was focused on my little corner of Monroe, asking questions, being sure that the new proposed zoning was going to be in our favor. But I also saw the bigger picture, and I realized the importance of having a plan and guidance to get us where we want to be in Monroe in the future. And I am very much for this. From all this discussion that I've only heard parts of, because I have a hearing problem with all of this anytime I come to a meeting. But from what I can tell, nothing is written in stone. And if we have to tweak it along the way, so be it. If we work together and we express to our leaders what we need as citizens, there's so many avenues: a phone call, an email, report an issue on the website. I know y'all are tired of hearing from me, but when I see things that need to be corrected in my city, I report it. And believe it or not, I've had great success. I am so impressed with the leaders in our city. And I do want to go on record saying that. Thank you, Planning Department.
Thank you. Is there anyone else would like to speak in favor of the proposal? Okay. This time I'll now call individuals that have signed up to speak in opposition to the project. And I'll remind you the same as I did for the other side. A 3-minute limit, please, and your name and address. First will be Mr. Haskell Williams. Haskell?
Yes, Haskell Williams, 3116 Creekwood Drive. I first want to thank Kimley and Horn and Lisa and the planning department for giving oversight to this. What I hear tonight is a change from what has been posted on the website, particularly relating to the R40 or RR. I would like to see that written so that we can look at that and to understand what the actual zoning. We saw a map up there, but we could not read the detail. With regard to clear cutting, that is done regularly, and I live right next to that. It was if a mower went through and took out everything. Instead of mystic wood, it's missing woods. And I appreciate the concern, Councilman Gordon. Whether that is cared for by a fine once someone starts developing, or however that is dealt with, that needs to be done, because it's simply bypassing the whole zoning issue. The replacement of 4 for 1 takes a long time to come back to create that buffer. I know that it's a diameter issue, but the foliage that is taken down cannot be replaced in a matter of months or years. I would specifically ask that the UDO be delayed until these can be addressed. I understand that it is a work in progress, but I think these can be addressed in a relatively short time and can be placed again before the council, because we will not get notices. This was a citywide notice that was sent out to every resident of Monroe. We will not get notices for those tweaks. We will not be able to know that they are being addressed in a manner consistent with the community. I applaud the steps in the UDO. Let's get these tweaks taken and look at it as a whole. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Williams. Mr. Dodson?
Good evening, neighbors.
Good evening.
Evening, council.
Good evening.
I would like to first thank you for, I was one of those concerned individuals about the loss of R40. I appreciate the response of the council and somewhat of the planning department. I'm hard on Mr. Brett, but apparently somebody got the idea that that should be left in. Now, the problem is, I don't know where that is. We couldn't see where it was at. We're told that it exists, but I didn't see any of it on any of the documents. So I have no way of knowing if I'm still in that RR or if I'm not, or how the new developments that are, their developers actually here to discuss that matter as far as developing the clear cutting that Mr. Haskell was talking about. But one of the things I would like to tell you is Raleigh, Greensboro, Concord all have redone their UDOs in the past 5 years. Each one of those has some type of what we would call now RR or R40. So it's not a misuse of land or misuse of property to do that. I'm concerned that I think this should be tabled, because those tweaks someone's going to have to live with. I don't know how many developments are going to be put in place before those tweaks take place. Once this is voted in, I would assume that it goes into effect. It's now policy. It's not policy with tweaks. It's now the standard. And everyone here, I would hope, lives in Monroe will have to live with that policy. And so I'm concerned with that. I think it should be tabled. I'm bothered a little by the fact that we come here and we're all surprised that now there's R40. I don't know if anybody else is, but I know I am. That should have been sent to us. This should be happening a month from now or 2 months from now, where we could all take a look at where our houses are. Thank you.
Mr. Dodson, would you be so kind as to provide your name and address, because so that you do what everyone else has done?
Oh, well, he called me by name, sir.
That's all right. No, but he also asked everyone to do that.
Monroe, North Carolina.
Thank you, ma'am.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dodson. Next is Mary, and I'm sorry, O-U-V-I-C or N-I-C, I can't really discern. Fox Hunt Drive.
Can't understand what you're saying.
Mary, it looks like O-U-N-I-C on Fox Hunt Drive. Is anyone still outside?
Is there anyone in the other room?
No, this is everybody.
Okay.
Okay. Yes, ma'am.
I must have signed the wrong paper, but I will stand up and say something.
Well,
Okay, I'm new at this, and my name's Mary Obnick, and I'm 2945 Foxton Drive in Monroe. And our whole neighborhood subdivision is very concerned about the possible building of the Fox Hunt Estate Phase 2, which is going to be off of Fowler Seacrest Road. Now, we did get all the notifications about the meetings and stuff, but when Lisa was saying about developers can come in and just rip out all the woods behind your house, which this happened to us. Nobody knew what was going on. We called City Hall, we called, city council members, and they said, well, we don't have any information about that. But all the acreage back there is gone. All the trees are gone. We don't want this to happen again in our community. I've been living here for probably 11 years in the same house, in the same development, and it's a community, family community. We don't want to move, but everybody's talking about moving to Florida, down south, because the situation here is getting very, very bad on what we're seeing. Our children, our grandchildren are going to be living in this kind of condition. We don't have the infrastructure there either. We don't have parks. We don't have busing. If we rezone everything, how are the kids going to go to school, and how is this all going to happen? So, I'm against this whole project, and I know the builder is going to, we're going to vote on this at some point, but at this point, I thank the council members for listening. Again, I'm new, but I will, there's probably about 250 homes in our subdivision, and we're all opposed to this. So thank you for listening, and hopefully we'll come to a conclusion. Thank you.
thank you, ma'am. Next up, speaker is Debbie Delaretto. D-E-L-O.
Yeah, here she
Here
is.
we are. Okay, Debbie.
Hi.
Did I come close?
My name's Debbie DiLoretto. I live at 3014 Hunt Club Avenue, Monroe. I wasn't planning to speak, but basically, I believe in development. I believe a land user has the right to do what they want with their property, sell it, develop it. I believe that good planning is needed. I think we've lived here for 15 years, and I think that everything is always catch up here, especially in the city of Monroe as well as Union County. You can't drive down a road that doesn't have a pothole. You're adding all this new development, and there's no infrastructure plan. There's no schools planned. Where are all the kids going to go to school? We live in a neighborhood that has been redistricted 3 times. My kids had to move schools. And what's going to happen if this new proposed development that we're talking that affects Fox Hunt is developed? Where are all those kids going to go to school? So I realize that there has to be a good planning operation put in place, but I think all of the other things need to be considered as well. And I don't think that we should change the R40. I think people should have the right to live on a 1 acre property or 5 acres. I think this is going to affect our rural community. You know, we're a big ag community here. I mean, what's going to happen to all that area, you know? So that's basically what I wanted to say. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate it. Ron from the Sticks Drive.
I've been sitting so long, I'm kind of dizzy when I stand up. My name is Ron Pereira, and I live at 1118 Sticks Drive. And we're currently, on one side, we have a 125-acre development that's sitting there waiting to happen. And on the other side, we have a 250-acre development that's waiting to happen. So we're going to end up looking like an appendix sticking out from the road with about 12 houses that are still county. So my concern with the UDO that's being proposed is, of course, strictly with regard to development and what happens to somebody who moved to a county location. We moved there because we thought it'd be less traffic, more privacy, a lot of trees, topsoil. And we moved here 3 years ago. My daughter lives in Matthews, and we didn't move there because I just thought it was too much traffic and too much urbanization. So I'm asking that the proposed zoning amendment be postponed to a later date as it requires substantial revisions. And I'll go through some of this. The proposed zoning map, you can't tell what's the boundary for the city, and you can't tell the boundary for the extraterritorial jurisdiction area because neither one of these appears in the legend if you look in the proposed zoning map that's supposed to be approved this evening. So my point is, I'm just trying to make a point that I think there's a lot of changes that you could use and maybe postpone this thing for 2 months or something and get those things in there rather than relying on changes being made afterwards. I'd be more comfortable if the changes were made before. I recommend that the new zoning map use the new residential district designation of RR or residential rural for the area marked as ETJ on the new zoning map. There is a new RR district, residential district zoning or whatever, but if you look at the map, it doesn't appear anywhere. It's not being used, which I thought was interesting. I urge that on page 472 of the UDO document that you include a table of contents and an index to facilitate the locating of specific topics within the total 472 pages. I had to read through that thing Friday afternoon. And, I recommend that, I have a bunch of other things. I recommend that the metrics or the accounting that was used to measure success in the proposal be changed. I recommend that the economic model used in the proposal be changed, as there is no unlimited quantity of land. Yes, sir?
Time's up, please.
3 minutes is.
My time's up? Give it about 10, 15 more seconds, if you would, sir. I'm looking at 3 minutes and 15 seconds right now.
15 seconds?
Well, if you would wrap it, we want to be fair to everybody.
Okay. I say there are 3 factors that go into any choice: immediate desires, habits, and long-term goals. I think this UDO is designed with immediate desires and incentives as a goal. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Can't you ask for a consensus? If all these people are here to say the same thing, can't we just ask them to raise their hand? And
Let's give them
Let them speak.
Kenneth Neal,
They
please.
signed up, let them talk.
Let them talk.
We all want our 15 minutes.
That's right.
That's
right. Sign up. Except for you only get 3.
My name is Kenneth Deal. I live at 1212 Rosa Drive, Monroe, North Carolina.
I wrote my comments down so I could provide you each a copy for, if you'd like, because there's some recommendations on the back. I wouldn't want to get lost in the comments. I've had to update it a little bit because I too have heard some new information here tonight. I'm very happy to hear about the RR part of the UDO. When I met the young man coming in tonight, I told him, he asked me, are you for or against the UDO? And I said, well, I'm mainly for it, but I have some concerns. He says, well, you got to go on the negative side of it then, so, which is fine. As I've heard other people, I would like to commend the planning department for the exceptional work on a Herculean task that they have undertaken here. We obviously needed something updated from 2003, and they've done a phenomenal job on that. I participated in the public meetings as well to check it in advance, and overall, I like what I see because it's less confusing, easier for the average person to understand, but as other people have said, no plan is perfect, and neither is this one. I'll read my comments to say within my 3 minutes. It says, before you vote to approve these new standards, I'd like to address some finer points of our ordinance. While everyone is keen to focus on density, the formula used to determine true density of developments is highly misleading to the general public. The formula is heavily tilted in favor of developers and that they can just acquire more adjacent land to get their density numbers lower without actually reducing the density of the development to stay within our zoning requirements. The new UDO has reestablished a lot of our zoning, but the developers pay no attention to that. They still submit what they want to submit. The formula is heavily tilted in their favor, and without actually reducing the density, density should be defined by buildable acreage, not gross acreage. For example, a builder can't build on a stream or its legal buffer, so that acreage should be subtracted when assessed to density. They also can't build on a road that's required to be installed to access their new development. That acreage should be deducted from the gross amount and therefore have an impact on the density amount. It should also be clear in the ordinance that density is just one factor that must be met. Minimum lot sizes, frontage, which is constantly ignored, should be held firm and not let constant requests for conditional district to allow developers to circumvent the intent.
Mr. Lewis, thank you very much for your comments.
Oh, okay.
We're almost at
3 minutes goes by fast. 3 good recommendations on the back. Please read.
Michael from GW Broom Road. I believe you spoke earlier.
Hello again.
Hello.
I got a text message here from a few people. At the location of the corner of Griffith Road and Helm Shortcut Road, there are over 315 voters that have stated very clearly they are opposed to this. They have been at this council seat before. There are 2 developments with over 700 houses that are planning, if approved, to be put in that area alone.
Excuse me, Michael, for clarification, we're talking about the UDO, or you're talking about the subdivision out there on Helm?
This is all trying to be annexed. Okay? If this all gets approved, it's going to create a huge problem. There needs to be a little bit more work done with this. This needs to be tabled. It needs to be reviewed. As somebody just said, this is a document that will be a standard. It won't be a living, breathing standard to the developers. They're going to say, that's the guideline, we're going after it. Plain and simple. You've also got the question of all this land that gets cleared out and then the applications get put in. Very simple. Penalize the living snot out of them. Hit them financially. And the bigger problem is, who's enforcing it? Who's going out there and looking at this? People get phone calls, we don't know anything about it. Why isn't there somebody in charge of that, being put with that, to go out and investigate these things? You've got to put the cart behind the horse. This plan is putting the cart in front of the horse. There's some serious issues that need to be addressed. And y'all need to table this minimum 90 days. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dale Lohberger from Washington Street.
Hello, my name is Dale Lohberger. I've been living at 502 South Washington Street here in Monroe in our beautiful historic district for almost 30 years. Like so many of other folks here, we've heard some substantial changes in this document. And my apologies to Councilman Gordon for keeping you up, but I've been here for over 2 hours. I'd like my 3 minutes.
Yeah.
Thank you. I think we all have a right to speak. I think we all have a right to understand what's in this document. Some significant changes have been made since most of us are aware of it. I think that in itself is grounds to delay this until people have a chance to read it, until you have a chance to read it. And I think specifically, and I know this has been said already, Councilman Gordon, but looking at gross acreage, I think is a gross misunderstanding of what our town is looking for in development. I'm not here to stop development. I want development that matches the character of our neighborhood. And that is not 2 houses per gross acre, which favors large developers. And we don't want to favor large developers. We want citizens who are going to live here, be participating in this city and participating in this government, hopefully, if, again, you will allow us our 3 minutes to talk and be part of this process. So I would ask that, I know there's been a lot of work done on this, but with the significant changes, please delay this until people have a chance, until you have a chance to look at it, correct these issues. It's asking an awful lot of these people to say, let us pass this, let's find out what's in it, let us fix it over time behind closed doors, behind Zoom meetings, behind things where we don't have our 3 minutes in front of you. Thank you very much.
Mr. Joe Mulrooney from Duck Point Drive.
Good evening, council. Good evening, neighbors. Joe Mulrooney, 2929 Duck Point Drive. Live off of Olive Branch Road. And I'm against the UDO. I think we need to reconsider a few things, and hopefully we're taking notes and listing out some things to consider. We've all talked about density. You've heard about gross acreage. You want to see some gross acreage, go to Morgan Mill and Olive Branch. There's some really gross acreage over there. The road's pretty torn up right now. It's only going to get worse. It's got a small extended lane. Traffic's going to get bad, and there are, 280 homes going in there. It's a lot of gross acreage. We have to consider density that's appropriate for adjacent properties. We have to consider the vegetation that's already there. I've seen some pictures on Morgan Mill Neighbors where people have had raw clay running off onto their property after it was clear cut. That's pretty devastating for somebody that had nothing to do with the land clearing. What stops developers from ignoring the buffer and the tree requirements? Well, we got to have penalties, and somebody said enforcement. That's got to happen. We need, if we are going to develop, we have to look at amenities like shopping, restaurants, entertainment, so people aren't driving to Charlotte, people aren't driving to Waxhaw. Let's keep everybody here in the neighborhood. And finally, I know city council doesn't have everything to do with roads, but consider what you can do. Let's cooperate, let's communicate with the state DOT. Let's look at a large development having more than one entrance and exit on the same road, have a rear exit. And by all means, if we have neighborhoods that have nice trees and 1 acre lots, and we're doing additional development adjacent to that, let's consider keeping that the same. If we have people that are in the historic district and they're in a tight-knit neighborhood, let's make it a neighborhood community, and let's all keep Monroe a place where we all want to live and shake hands.
Okay, Pam from Victorian Lane, please.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Pam Dude. I live at 821 Victorian Lane. I'm in the ETJ zone, which I feel we're a little bit of a stepchildren on that side. We have to obey by all the rules, but, you know, I have to be here present in order to speak to y'all. I did prepare something so I can stay within my 3 minutes. I would like to pass it out to y'all when I'm done. But I want to echo on what a lot of our folks here said tonight, so I'm not going to go over the same things. I did want to point out 3 issues that I want to add to what they've said. The one is I was encouraged to see that there's going to be a joint Monroe Union County Economic Development Commission. I think that's huge for Monroe, and I think that would be great that we come together. I was pleasantly surprised to hear about the R40, the RR. A little disappointed that I didn't know it prior, because what I had to say was all about the R40 tonight, so you kind of killed my thunder, but you can still read my comments. The other thing I wanted to mention was, under your rule and under having the R40 in our current zoning, you've allowed 6,000 units to be approved with 4 to 6 still pending. That's shame on you, because a lot of that has gone through the annexation and the conditional districting, and you're not even obeying by your own zoning. So when this UDO does get approved, let's follow our own rules. We respect that, and we appreciate all that you're doing. Doug Britt, he gets beat up by me too. Lisa's been awesome. I've been here 3 years. I'm trying to get involved, and I want to make a difference. And I want to be part of that solution, part of that change. And I came to Monroe, we moved to Monroe, not to Charlotte, not to Raleigh. You don't know how beautiful this place is. You have an urban, a suburban, and you have agricultural and farmland. Let's keep it the beauty that it is. Thank you.
Thank you.
Michael and Cynthia Fleming, I believe.
Good evening. Listening to the presentation.
Mike and Cynthia Fleming, 1122 Medlin Road.
I'm sorry. Listening to the presentation earlier, I'm sure that there are many good things in there. But for me, the game change would be if that in any ways allow more houses to be put on a piece of property. It's a game changer. It just shouldn't happen. Our property recently got degraded by a development. We're working with the city official for some relief, and we're very appreciative of it. I would ask that you tap on the brakes, because it's very obvious that the approval development process that's in place is missing some key components. Some other people have said that earlier, like oversight and, when necessary, enforcement. When we had the problem with our property, and it was cleared right in many places right to our property line, we asked and we called, what do we do now? Who do we talk to? Nobody in the town could tell us anybody. Everybody said, oh God, I guess there's nothing you can do about that. And that just was strange for me.
Yeah, and since we've been here, I mean, we've just really been taken aback by the growth that's been going on. We started to go to some of the city council meetings, the planning board meetings, just to get a better understanding. You know, we haven't heard a lot about the infrastructure as far as, you know, the water, the sewer, even the services like fire and the police. Like, how many are we down? How many are we going to need with all this increased growth? You know, and some of the meetings, it looks like that some of the items get looked at individually. They don't get looked at as a whole. And just not looking at the big picture and considering another development that's right next door, and how that impacts the community. And like Mike was saying, we've been personally impacted as there's a development that was rezoned that's being built on two sides of our property. And what was told in an August 2019 City Council meeting in relation to the buffers and the tree preservation, none of that happened. And what we're recommending is that things get written down on paper before they get approved. If you're discussing things, if things come up in the meeting, have it written down before it even gets approved. Because there is no accountability. Who is held accountable for what gets presented to the council when it never gets followed? Now, we found the most perfect, beautiful home in Monroe. It's our forever home. We had beautiful forest surrounding it. It was private. It was peaceful. It was our sanctuary. And just in an instant and an emotion, it just completely got destroyed. So we do oppose this rezoning amendment. I agree. I think there are some good parts, but there needs to be accountability, and there needs to be enforcement. And
I think if 2 years ago when we moved down here, and we spent months and months and months and months trying to find the perfect community, and when we found Monroe, we were like, this is it. If we knew then what we know now, if our property was then what it is now, we would not have moved here.
Thank you, sir.
thank you. Thank you.
Rachel Donahue, please.
Hi, my name is Rachel Donahue. I live at 2337 Balting Glass Drive, Indian Trail, but I pay Monroe taxes thanks to a conditional development, Glendalough. I am the mother of children who are in the 5th generation to live on the same plot of land here in Union County. Part of that is now in Monroe. On their behalf, I beg you to please pump the brakes on this rezoning plan. To continue increasing the population density, to continue facilitating such large-scale changes, these things are destroying the beauty of what has made Union County such a good place to live. I keep hearing we're not going to get it right the first time. I'm a book publisher. We publish books, and we do not send a book to print until it is ready. It has been thoroughly edited. And I have heard many things that need to be addressed in this plan before it is approved. The UDO is necessary, and I appreciate that much work, many, many hours of labor and conversations have gone into this, but it's not yet ready to be published. Take the time, edit it, get it right, and then publish it, because like these people are saying, people's lives are going to be changed by this document. People have long been pleading with you to stop increasing population density, and you've been ignoring them. The same issues keep coming up over and over again. Heavy traffic, overcrowding of schools, the destruction of beautiful farmland and habitats. You say that these issues are not under your control and therefore are of no concern. I've heard that from multiple members of the council at various points in time. To deny the impact of the decisions that you all have made is like a chain smoker denying the effect of secondhand smoke on her children. You can make better demands of the developers in Union County that you are annexing into the city limits of Monroe. The Council of Lancaster County, South Carolina, was approached by Provident Bayard, the very same developer who is building the Riverstone project, which you approved. You approved 312 houses on 170 acres. You approved 550 homes on the same acreage. They required $500 per house for the school district and $2,180 per house for public safety. Why didn't you do that for us? You're putting the whole burden on the people of Monroe by not making these requirements of developers. And you have the opportunity to do better. You can require that these developers cover the costs of the problems that they are creating with traffic, with schools, with farmland. You can make these demands. So I ask that you take the time to revisit this document and make those demands of developers. Put something in there that makes them jump through the hoops, because these developers are going to do the minimum viable product, because what matters to them is the dollar. What matters to the people of Monroe is their home. We live here. So whatever grand vision you have for the future urbanization of this city, please heed the warning signs for the good of the people of Monroe. Not just with a thought of what you want Monroe to be in the future, but with a care for the people who make up Monroe today.
Thank you, Ms.
Thanks.
Mayor Pro Tem asked me to answer the question about impact fees. You raised that with respect to, I think, Lancaster County, South Carolina. South Carolina law is very different than North Carolina law. We are not allowed to charge impact fees. In fact, the city was sued over a fee that we charge for capacity for installing a water meter, and it ended up being, I think, about a $1.6 million settlement that was paid out over the last year. So the impact fees, while an idea that many North Carolina local governments like, have been determined by our courts to be illegal. Therefore, we don't get to use them.
Thank you, Chief. Bob Yanachek.
I'll be brief, but Bob Yanachek, 513 Everett Street. And first, I want to thank everyone for coming out tonight. To be honest with you, I didn't know that the R40 was back on the books, like everyone else. And I would say you're probably the reason that it's back on there. Like everyone said, thanks. We didn't see the actual modification since it went through the planning board and was approved. My recommendation would be let all the people that are concerned actually see something in writing first before you make a motion to approve it. And then come up with some method to where we can keep everyone involved. I understand it's a living document, things change, but they need to be involved with that. And sometimes I think people kind of fall through the cracks and their opinions do matter. So, thanks.
Is there anyone else that would like to speak in opposition? There being no other comments, I'll close the public hearing and move to take action.
Make a
Mayor.
motion, we table it.
Mayor,
Yes, sir.
being the oldest bird on this council, I'll say my piece first. I think Lisa and her staff's been doing a good job. I think we got a good guy in, but I don't think we're ready to vote. I would want to see us wait till probably March. We've been critiqued. There's several issues that were brought up that I also got major concerns with. So I'm going to make a motion that we take this and come back in March to.
Second.
Would that be without further advertising?
That's correct.
Table it without further advertising?
You're saying to delay it till.
No,
What's the
actually,
motion
you are,
I said to table this till March and give us time to work through some of the suggestions that our citizens have brought to us tonight.
I think everyone that's in the room would be aware that it's in March, and the city would follow the normal process. It wouldn't go to the extraordinary process is done. I don't think there'd necessarily be postcards, but council can direct us as it feels appropriate, depending on the nature of your motion. Councilmember
I have a motion and a second.
Yeah, I like that. I'd like to see it posted again because there may be people who had opinions one way or the other that may not have had the opportunity to be here tonight. So I think it should be published again.
Yeah.
Would you change your motion then
What's that?
to postpone it, to table it to March, but then advertise it again?
Yes.
Okay.
I resecond.
There was one lady back here that wants to make a comment. I hate to deny someone the opportunity.
Absolutely. Who would like to, even though we're kind of going out of order here?
I'm so sorry about that. My name is Linda Jewett, 709 Victoria Lane. Transparency, please. From the day of internet, there's no reason why these documents can't be posted and in live time, real time, to see the changes you're making. We can view them at will. Please, thank you.
Okay. We've got a motion and a second. All those in favor of the motion signify by raising your hand, please. Okay, the motion carries. No further action needed then. We'll move on to item 19. Those of y'all that came just for this and would like to excuse yourself here, we thank you for coming.
Stand up too.
Who would have voted on it? Because Councilmember McGee. If you had voted on it when you said to, I think it would have passed. So.
It's all good.
Loretta,
Oh, I got it somewhere.
thank you for coming.
Everybody's happy.
Yeah.
I don't think that's ever going to be possible.
Well, I mean, satisfied.
Yes.
Right.
No, we're just getting started.
And to be honest with you, it's actually now been moved to February. February now.
That was only your polling for the hearing. Everyone gets confused. Council's not acting on anything tonight. They were just calling for the hearing in November, and now they've moved it to February.
Yeah.
I think they said it when you guys were outside.
Y'all might have been outside or something.
Stand outside when we said we were. I know it's been. I like that guy there. I'm getting Have a good night. Thanks for coming out.
Take care.
Went down the wrong way.
Thank you.
How you doing? Good seeing you. Thanks for your email.
How are you? Good. See you. Thanks for coming out.
Yes, ma'am. Yep, nice to see you.
Right, come see. Oh, pleasure. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely. Thank you so much.
Right now, we don't have to keep the building.
Ron, listen, don't think that we don't appreciate your comments, or that we don't read them, because I do. Yeah, and they have a great deal. It's apparent that you put a great deal of thought and effort into it. So don't ever worry that we don't see it. We do. I may not vote all the time the way you would want me to, but I do appreciate it. Yeah.
It's Tuesday the 12th.
Folks, we can have our seats. First, we're going to move on to item 19. The next item is the consideration of a resolution approving in principle issuance of not to exceed $16 million of Monroe Housing Authority multifamily housing revenue bonds for the benefit of the Icemer Community Partners, LP. We'll recognize Kristen Kirby of McGuire Woods to present this request.
Good evening, Mayor, Council members. My name is Kristen Kirby. I'm an attorney at McGuire Woods in Raleigh, and we are serving as bond counsel to the Monroe Housing Authority in connection with this financing. The Housing Authority has been asked to issue up to $16 million of affordable housing bonds to finance the rehabilitation of Icemer Apartments, which is an existing 99-unit affordable housing development located within the city. Under the federal tax code, for the bonds to be tax exempt, they have to be approved by the elected legislative body that has jurisdiction over both the issuer of the bonds and the site of the project. And so that's why we're before the City Council this evening as the elected legislative body for Monroe, since the City Council does appoint the members of the Housing Authority's board. You have jurisdiction over the Housing Authority and the project, which is located within the city. These bonds will not be a debt or a liability of the Housing Authority or of the city. They are repayable solely from payments to be made by the developer that is acquiring and renovating the property. And so they won't affect the city's debt ratios or your legal debt limit or financials in any way. This project is being developed by Community Preservation Partners, an experienced affordable housing developer. They are planning approximately $57,000 per unit of renovations for Ice Morley Apartments. This is the first major renovation of this property since it was built. I'm happy to answer any questions that the council has about the bonds or the project itself.
All 99 units will be done?
Yes, ma'am. So currently, there are 90 let me make sure I say this correctly, 90 affordable units and 9 market rate units at the property. They will all be renovated, and following the renovation, all 99 will be subject to income restrictions or be affordable housing units.
Now, will that also include playground equipment, landscaping, sidewalks?
Yes, so it'll be a pretty fulsome renovation of the entire facility, including, HVAC updates to the community room, security updates, new lighting, a pretty, broad overhaul of the property.
Does it include relocation monies for the residents while you work on their units?
Yes, ma'am. So this will be an in-place rehabilitation, so none of the residents will have to be moved on a permanent basis. There may be times during construction that residents would have to be out of their units for a couple of days at a time. And during that time, the developer will provide, hotel lodging and vouchers for the residents during any periods that they have to be out of their unit while larger construction items are happening. Most of the renovations would just require residents to be out during the day and be able to get back in their apartments in the evening. And typically there's a community room or space set up where residents can go during that time. So they're not having to be displaced.
I just like to say, the last 2.5 months, I've had an opportunity to spend a lot of time in Ice Morley. I'm happy to see that that's on the table for them. I think it will help the morale of the community. It's very badly needed. And since many people have to spend most of their lives there, I think it's a plus. It's also a plus for the city. Thank you for doing that.
Thank you. Question for you.
Yes, ma'am.
So would management change? How would that work with the current management in place now?
Yes, so the management company is expected to change. The new property management company will be Win Residential, which is one of the largest affordable housing property managers in the country. My understanding from the developer is that they are talking to Win and talking to the current, people who are on site at the property to see if they'd be a good fit to move forward with the new company. So I don't know if whether the day-to-day people will still be there, but the property management company that oversees it will be changing.
Okay. Who's the developer, you said?
Community Preservation Partners.
I'm wondering if this is going to afford the residents to have some type of council or committees where they can sit on, help make decisions, and really be involved in the community.
That part I'm not sure of. I don't know the answer to that. I apologize.
Thank you.
Sure.
So basically, there's going to be $6 million spent on renovations and then $10 million spent on external.
Well, so a large part of the cost is the acquisition of the property from the current owner. So they have to purchase it. I mean, that's a big portion of the budget.
That's already been negotiated then, and
Yes,
they're committed to that number?
I believe they do have a purchase and sale agreement in place.
How much are they actually
Seems
to
high.
upgrade the property?
I apologize.
How much will they spend to actually upgrade the property?
Approximately $57,000 per door, per unit.
15,000?
57.
Okay, I thought 15 was.
No, yeah.
I'll go ahead and make the motion to adopt the resolution.
I'll second it.
Okay, we got a motion and a second. Any discussion? Okay, all in favor signify by raising your hand, please. All right, motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Item 20 is the consideration of a request to install a civil rights trail marker at Monroe Country Club. I think interim city manager Brian Bourne will introduce this. Is Robert Heath?
Robert's right
Oh,
there.
there's Robert. We'll make a request for the manager's letter of support. So I'll turn it over to you, Brian.
All right, thank you. We have a request here from a few good men who want to submit an application for a civil rights trail marker to the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission for consideration. The civil rights marker would mark a place of historical or cultural significance on property owned by the city of Monroe. The site location would be the former swimming pool, now a putting green, in the lower parking lot of the Monroe Country Club and Golf Course. It was here that local African American youth from the nearby Winchester neighborhood protested for the right to swim in the only public pool within the city. The protest took place in both 1957 and 1961. A few good men request a letter of support to go with the application for a civil rights trail marker to be placed at the site of the former public swimming pool in the lower parking lot of Monroe Country Club in an appropriate location agreed upon by both parties. Their application is due October 31st. And staff requests City Council consider public input and approve the interim city manager to write the letter of support to accompany the application for the trail marker to the North Carolina African American Heritage Commission and approve locating the civil rights marker on city property if awarded. And I'd like to introduce Mr. Robert Heath to say a few words.
And I'll be 2 minutes.
Right.
Real stretch me.
Call them out.
All right. Good evening. I'm Robert Heath with A Few Good Men, 5630 Ainsley Court, Matthews, North Carolina. I'm here to request the support of the trail marker from 1961. As you know, the Few Good Men is a long-standing organization in the city of Monroe since 1991. And I know our founders are looking down because many have passed away. Let me give you some names who were our founders, and you will know them right away. P. Bazemore, former council member, for him. John Crowder, former school board member. Lee Miller, former administrator. Ralph Bolden. Those are members of past. Those who are living, James White, who was a big person in the money. He was, I think he was a,
Bondsman.
Bondsman. He was a bondsman at the time. George Massey was one of the first black farmers in Monroe, and also John Harris, who is now owns a funeral home here in Monroe. We believe that our young people and old should know this experience that happened in 1961 and 1957, because right now nobody knows, because right now they see a putting green there. In the late 50s, several young men passed away by drowning in local ponds. And Robert Williams and Dr. Perry put together a group of young girls and boys who protest at the pool in Monroe. Several pastors came to the city council to ask to swim at the pool 3 days a week. That was denied. Then they asked, because they said if they let them swim, they have to change the water. And you know why they didn't want to change it, because they thought it would be contaminated with black youth swimming in that pool. That's how sad it was at that time. So they would ask to build a pool in Newtown. He said he had no money to do that either, so that was denied. So in 1961, the first incident happened. 57 and 61 was the second time. Here's an article in Monroe. First, let me go back one thing. The Monroe Country Club was first named Lake Lee Park, the whole essence, in 1935 and 37 when it was first built. And in an article in 1935, and at that time called the Monroe Journal, this statement was written: the pool, golf course, or community would be for the people of Monroe. That was written in 1935. As you know, that did not happen into the late 50s and 60s. So we're asking for this marker to be put there to show that it happened, because when the pool, when they finally integrated the pool in 1961, the city council said this pistol would be closed. So they closed it down, and they tore it down and built a pool there. So they built the golf course putting green there. So we're asking for, and this, I want to go back one more statement. The Few Good Men will be responsible for all funds incurred for this building. So there'll be no funds coming from the city of Monroe. We just asking for a letter of support to submit to the application, and that's no guarantee. I heard that getting the city marker, getting any type marker from the state is very difficult. But we had, I had Patricia Pola, you may know her, she's a retired person in the library. She's been helping with the verbiage to get the word correct and make sure when it's submitted, it would be accepted by the state. And whatever state charged us to build the marker and have it installed, we will incur that expense with a Few Good Men. Have any questions?
I have a statement, I don't have a question. That is part of Monroe's history. It's not a pretty part of it, but it is a part of history. History cannot be denied, and we should have wanted repeated. So I would encourage my fellow council members to grant this and make this a resolution. I remember when it happened. I was 10 years old the first time, and it's just as vivid today as it was then. I'm real happy well, I'm not thrilled with where we are today, but I'm happy from which we have come, because we've made a lot of strides. We've got some ways to go, but to me, acknowledging that and moving on would be a beautiful and the right thing to do.
I make a motion that we approve this request.
I'll second that.
We have a motion and a second. All in favor? If you would raise your hand, please.
Thank you for your support.
Thank you, Mr. Heath.
Thank you,
Appreciate your
Mr. Heath.
presentation. The next item is the consideration of contract for Camp Sutton Electrical Substation Transformer Cabinets. David Lucor will bring us up to date on that.
Good evening again, Mayor Pro Tem and Council. David Lucor, Director of Energy Services. We are requesting approval of a purchase contract for some cabinets for the Camp Sutton Substation transformers. That station was actually built by Duke Power in the late 60s. The transformers are the original transformers from that time, and we need this to upfit those transformers to continue to preserve their life and continue to provide reliable electric service to our customers. We did solicit bids, and Delta Star was the successful bidder, and we were unable to take this to public enterprise due to the cancellation of the meeting, and the chairman authorized us to bring it directly to council. I'll be happy to answer any questions you may have.
Motion to award contract to Delta Star.
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Those in favor, raise your hand, please. Okay.
Motion to authorize interim city manager to execute any and all necessary documents.
Second it.
We have a motion and a second. Would signify by raising your hand, please. That carries also. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. And, excuse me. Next, I'd like to recognize Citizens Appointment Committee Chair Saluda Anthony to make a presentation, please.
Recommendation for appointments, reappointments to commissions. The Citizens Appointment Committee met on September 13, 2021. Following the consideration of applications and discussion, consensus of the committee was to recommend the following appointments. Downtown Advisory Board, appoint Marie Starnes to a partial term to replace Heather Bosty. This will go into effect January 1st, 2021, and the term expires 12/31/2021. Monroe Tourism Development Authority, appoint Mary Ann Raspberry to a full term as an at-large member, effective January 1, 2021. Term expires 12/31/2023. Planning Board, appoint William David Dotson to a partial term to replace Edith Covington, effective January 1st, 2021. The term expires 12/31/2022. Public Safety Committee, appoint Selena Campbell to a full term, effective date January 1, 2021. Term expires 12/31/2022.
Okay, we have
That is a motion.
We have a motion to approve the recommendations.
Councilman James got a statement. As it's been stated on the Public Safety Committee, there was one applicant, and then this one came up, Marion and Gordon. Why wasn't Saluda Anthony recommendation for Robert Yanishek second?
I'm not sure if I understand the
The
question.
question is, Saluda made a recommendation for Robert Yanishek to be on it, and it wasn't second by Gordon or Holloway. Why was that?
I simply felt that that this was the right decision for our city and our committee structure. And it was my decision, and I stand by it.
And I stand by my decision also. Do we have a motion to approve the recommendations?
So moved.
All right, a second? Councilman Kazar seconds it. All those in favor, if you would signify by raising your hand, please. All right, those against, opposed, raise your hand. Okay. So that is 42. We have a motion for an adjournment.
So moved.
Have a motion and a second. All in favor, signify by raising your hand, please. Thank you very much.